Welcome back to the cozy place. We continue our story, The Children of the New Forest, Part 3. Let's listen together to relax our bodies and minds.
Chapter 13. As soon as he was out of the intendant's house, Edward hastened to the cottage of Oswald Partridge, whom he found waiting for him, for the verderer had not failed to deliver his message. "You have had a long talk with Mistress Patience," said Oswald, after the first greeting, "and I am glad of it, as it gives you consequence here. The Roundhead rascal whom you met was inclined to be very precise about doing his duty, and insisted that he was certain that you were on the lookout for deer, but I stopped his mouth by telling him that I often took you out with me, as you were the best shot in the whole forest, and that the intendant knew that I did so. I think that if you were caught in the act of killing a deer you had better tell them that you killed it by my request, and I will bear you out, if they bring you to the intendant, who will, I'm sure, thank me for saying so. You might kill all the deer in the forest after what you have done for him. Many thanks, but I do not think I can take advantage of your offer. Let them catch me if they can, and if they do catch me, let them take me if they can. I see, sir, that you will accept no favor from the Roundheads," replied Oswald. "However, as I am now head keeper, I shall take care that my men do not interfere with you, if I can help it. All I wish is to prevent any insult or indignity being offered to you, they not being aware who you are, as I am." "Many thanks, Oswald, I must take my chance." Edward then told Oswald of their having taken the gypsy boy in the pit, at which he appeared much amused. "What is the name of the verderer whom I met in the forest?" inquired Edward. "James Corbould. He was discharged from the army," replied Oswald. "I do not like his appearance," said Edward. "No, his face tells against him," replied Oswald. "But I know nothing of him. He has been here little more than a fortnight." "Can you give me a corner to put my head in tonight, Oswald? For I shall not start till tomorrow morning." "You may command all I have, sir," replied Oswald, "but I fear there is little more than a hearty welcome. I have no doubt that you could be lodged at the intendant's house if you choose." "No, Oswald, the young lady is alone, and I will not trust to Phoebe's accommodation again. I will stay here, if you will permit me." "And welcome, sir. I will put your puppy in the kennel at once." Edward remained that night at Oswald's, and at daylight he rose, and having taken a slight breakfast, throwing his gun over his shoulder, went to the kennel for Holdfast, and set off on his return home. "That's a very nice little girl," were the words which Edward found himself constantly saying to himself as he walked along, "and she is of a grateful disposition, or she would not have behaved as she has done towards me, supposing me to be of mean birth." And then he thought of what she had told him relative to her father, and Edward felt his animosity against a Roundhead wasting fast away. "I am not likely to see her again very soon," thought Edward, "unless, indeed, I am brought to the intendant as a prisoner." Thus thinking upon one subject or another, Edward had gained above 8 miles of his journey across the forest, when he thought that he was sufficiently far away to venture to look out for some venison. Remembering there was a thicket not far from him, in which there was a clear pool of water, Edward thought it very likely that he might find a stag there cooling himself, for the weather was now very warm at noonday. He therefore called Holdfast to him, and proceeded cautiously towards the thicket. As soon as he arrived at the spot, he crouched and crept silently through the underwood. At last he arrived close to the cleared spot by the pool. There was no stag there, but fast asleep upon the turf lay James Corbould, the sinister-looking verderer who had accosted him in the forest on the previous day. Holdfast was about to bark, when Edward silenced him, and then advanced to where the verderer was lying, and who, having no dog with him to give notice of Edward's approach, still remained snoring with the sun shining on his face. Edward perceived that his gun was under him on the grass. He took it up, gently opened the pan and scattered the powder, and then laid it down again, for Edward said to himself, "That man has come out after me, that I am certain, and as there are no witnesses, he may be inclined to be mischievous, for a more wretched-looking person I never saw. Had he been deer hunting, he would have brought his dog, but he is man-hunting, that is evident. Now I will leave him, and should he fall in with anything, he will not kill at first shot, that's certain, and if he follows me, I shall have the same chance of escape as anything else he may fire at." Edward then walked out of the covert, thinking that if ever there was a face which proclaimed a man to be a murderer it was that of James Corbould. As he was threading his way, he heard the howl of a dog, and on looking round, perceived that Holdfast was not with him. He turned back, and Holdfast came running to him. The fact was, that Holdfast had smelt some meat in the pocket of the verderer, and had been putting his nose in to ascertain what it was. In so doing he had wakened up Corbould, who had saluted him with a heavy blow on the head. This occasioned the puppy to give the howl, and also occasioned Corbould to seize his gun, and follow stealthily in the track of the dog, which he well knew to be the one he had seen the day before with Edward. Edward waited for a short time, and not perceiving that Corbould made his appearance, continued on his way home, having now given up all thoughts of killing any venison. He walked fast, and was within 6 miles of the cottage, when he stopped to drink at a small rill of water, and then sat down to rest himself for a short time. While so doing, he fell into one of his usual reveries, and forgot how time passed away. He was, however, aroused by a low growl on the part of Holdfast, and it immediately occurred to him that Corbould must have followed him. Thinking it as well to be prepared, he quietly loaded his gun, and then rose up to reconnoiter. Holdfast sprang forward, and Edward, looking in the direction, perceived Corbould partly hidden behind a tree, with his gun leveled at him. He heard the trigger pulled, and snap of the lock, but the gun did not go off, and then Corbould made his appearance, striking at Holdfast with the butt end of his gun. Edward advanced to him and desired him to desist, or it would be the worse for him. "Indeed, younker, it may be the worse for you," cried Corbould. "It might have been if your gun had gone off," replied Edward. "I did not aim at you. I aimed at the dog, and I will kill the brute, if I can. Not without danger to yourself, but it was not him that you aimed at. Your gun was not pointed low enough to hit the dog, it was leveled at me, you sneaking wretch, and I have only to thank my own prudence and your sleepy head for having escaped with my life. I tell you candidly that I threw the powder out of your pan while you were asleep. If I served you as you deserve, I should now put my bullet into you, but I cannot kill a man who is defenseless, and that saves your life, but set off as fast as you can away from me, for if you follow me, I will show no more forbearance." "Away with you directly," continued Edward, raising his gun to his shoulder and pointing it to Corbould. "If you do not be off, I'll fire." Corbould saw that Edward was resolute, and thought proper to comply with his request. He walked away till he considered himself out of gunshot, and then commenced a torrent of oaths and abusive language, with which we shall not offend our readers. Before he went farther, he swore that he would have Edward's life before many days had passed, and then shaking his fist he went away. Edward remained where he was standing till the man was fairly out of sight, and then proceeded on his journey. It was now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Edward, as he walked on, said to himself, "That man must be of a very wicked disposition, for I have offended him in nothing except in not submitting to be made his prisoner. And is that an offense to take a man's life for? He is a dangerous man, and will be more dangerous after being again foiled by me as he has been today. I doubt if he will go home. I am almost sure that he will turn and follow me when he thinks that he can without my seeing him, and if he does, he will find out where our cottage is, and who knows what mischief he may not do, and how he may alarm my little sisters? I'll not go home till dark, and I'll now walk in another direction, that I may mislead him." Edward then walked away more to the north, and every half-hour shifted his course, so as to be walking in a very different direction from where the cottage stood. In the meantime it grew gradually dark, and as it became so, every now and then when Edward passed a large tree he turned round behind it and looked to see if Corbould was following him. At last, just as it was dark, he perceived the figure of a man at no great distance from him, who was following him, running from tree to tree, so as to make his approach. "Oh, you are there," thought Edward. "Now will I give you a nice dance, and we will see whose legs are tired soonest. Let me see, where am I?" Edward looked round, and then perceived that he was close to the clump of trees where Humphrey had made his pitfall for the cattle, and there was a clear spot of about 1/4 of a mile between it and where he now stood. Edward made up his mind, and immediately walked out to cross the clearing, calling Holdfast to heel. It was now nearly dark, for there was only the light of the stars, but still there was sufficient light to see his way. As Edward crossed the cleared spot, he once looked round and perceived that Corbould was following him, and nearer than he was before, trusting probably to the increased darkness to hide his approach. "That will do," thought Edward. "Come along, my fine fellow." And Edward walked on till he came to the pitfall. There he stopped and looked round, and soon discovered the verdure at 100 yards distance. Edward held his dog by the mouth, that he should not growl or bark, and then went on in a direction so as to bring the pitfall exactly between Corbould and himself. Having done so, he proceeded at a more rapid pace, and Corbould following him also increased his, till he arrived at the pitfall, which he could not perceive, and fell into it headlong, and as he fell into the pit, at the same time Edward heard the discharge of his gun, the crash of the small branches laid over it, and a cry on the part of Corbould. "That will do," thought Edward. "Now you may lie there as long as the gypsy did, and that will cool your courage. Humphrey's pitfall is full of adventure. In this case it has done me a service. Now I may turn and go home as fast as I can. Come, hold fast, old boy, we both want our suppers. I can answer for one, for I could eat the whole of that pasty which Oswald set before me this morning." Edward walked at a rapid pace, quite delighted at the issue of the adventure. As he arrived near to the cottage he found Humphrey outside, with Pablo, on the lookout for him. He soon joined them, and soon after embraced Alice and Edith, who had been anxiously waiting for his return, and who had wondered at his being out so late. "Give me my supper, my dear girls," said Edward, "and then you shall know all about it." As soon as Edward had satisfied his craving appetite, for he had not, as my readers must recollect, eaten anything since his departure early in the morning from the house of Oswald Partridge, he entered into a narrative of the events of the day. They all listened with great interest, and when Edward had finished, Pablo, the gypsy boy, jumped up and said, "Now he is in the pit. Tomorrow morning I take gun and shoot him." "No, no, Pablo, you must not do that," replied Edward, laughing. "Pablo," said little Edith, "go and sit down. You must not shoot people." "He shoot master then," said Pablo, "he very bad man." "But if you shoot him, you will be a bad boy, Pablo," replied Edith, who appeared to have assumed an authority over him. Pablo did not appear to understand this, but he obeyed the order of his little mistress, and resumed his seat at the chimney corner. "But, Edward," said Humphrey, "what do you propose to do?" "I hardly know. My idea was to let him remain there for a day or two, and then send to Oswald to let him know where the fellow was." "The only objection to that is," replied Humphrey, "that you say his gun went off as he fell into the pit. It may be probable that he is wounded, and if so, he might die if he is left there." "You are right, Humphrey, that is possible, and I would not have the life of a fellow creature on my conscience. I think it would be advisable, Edward, that I should set off early tomorrow on the pony, and see Oswald, tell him all that has occurred, and show him where the pitfall is." "I believe that would be the best plan, Humphrey." "Yes," said Alice, "it would be dreadful that a man should die in so wicked a state. Let him be taken out, and perhaps he will repent." "Won't God punish him, brother?" said Edith. "Yes, my dear, sooner or later, the vengeance of heaven overtakes the wicked. But I am very tired after so long a walk. Let us go to prayers, and then to bed." The danger that Edward had incurred that day was felt strongly by the whole party, and, with the exception of Pablo, there was earnest devotion and gratitude to heaven when their orisons were offered up. Humphrey was off before daybreak, and, at 9 o'clock, had arrived at the cottage of Oswald, by whom he was warmly greeted before the cause of his unexpected arrival was made known. Oswald was greatly annoyed at Humphrey's narration, and appeared to be very much of the opinion of Pablo, which was, to leave the scoundrel where he was, but on the remonstrance of Humphrey, he set off, with 2 of the other Verdaires, and before nightfall Humphrey arrived at the pitfall, where they heard Corbould groaning below. "Who's there?" said Oswald, looking into the pit. "It's me, it's Corbould," replied the man. "Are you hurt?" "Bullet, yes, badly," replied Corbould. "When I fell, my gun went off, and the ball has gone through my thigh. I have almost bled to death." Humphrey went for the ladder, which was at hand, and, with much exertion on the part of the whole 4 of them, they contrived to drag out Corbould, who groaned heavily with pain. A handkerchief was tied tightly round his leg, to prevent any further bleeding, and they gave him some water, which revived him. "Now, what's to be done?" said Oswald. "We can never get him home." "I will tell you," said Humphrey, walking with him aside. "It will not do for any of these men to know our cottage, and we cannot take them there. Desire them to remain with the man, while you go for a cart to carry him home. We will go to the cottage, give Billy his supper, and then return with him in the cart, and bring your men something to eat. Then I will go with you, and bring the cart back again before daylight. It will be a night's walk, but it will be the safest plan." "I think so too," replied Oswald, who desired the men to wait till his return, as he was going to borrow a cart, and then set off with Humphrey. As soon as they arrived at the cottage, Humphrey gave the pony to Pablo to put into the stable and feed, and then communicated to Edward the state of Corbould. "It's almost a pity that he had not killed himself outright," observed Oswald. "It would have been justice to him for attempting your life without any cause. He is a bloodthirsty scoundrel, and I wish he was anywhere but where he is. However, the intendant shall know of it, and I have no doubt that he will be discharged." "Do nothing in a hurry, Oswald," replied Edward. "At present let him give his own version of the affair, for he may prove more dangerous when discharged than when under your control. Now sit down and take your supper. Billy must have an hour to get his, and therefore there is no hurry for you." "That is your gypsy lad, Edward, is he not?" said Oswald. "Yes. I like the boy's looks, but they are a queer race." "You must not trust him too much," continued Oswald in an undertone, "until you have tried him, and are satisfied of his fidelity. They are very excitable, and capable of strong attachment if well treated, that I know, for I did a gypsy a good turn once, and it proved to be the saving of my life afterwards." "Oh, tell us how, Oswald," said Alice. "It is too long a story now, my dear little lady," reft Oswald, "but I will another time. Whatever he may do, do not strike him, for they never forgive a blow, I am told by those who know them, and it never does them any good. As I said before, they are a queer race." "He will not be beaten by us," reft Humphrey, "depend upon it, unless Edith slaps him, for she is the one who takes most pains with him, and I presume he would not care much about her little hand." "No, no," replied Oswald, laughing, "Edith may do as she pleases." "What does he do for you?" "Oh, nothing as yet, for he is hardly recovered, poor fellow," replied Humphrey. "He follows Edith, and helps her to look for the eggs, and last night he set some springes after his own fashion, and certainly beat me, for he took 3 rabbits and a hare, while I, with all my traps, only took 1 rabbit." "I think you had better leave that part of your livelihood entirely to him. He has been bred up to it, Humphrey, and it will be his amusement. You must not expect him to work very hard, they are not accustomed to it. They live a roving life, and never work if they can help it. Still, if you make him fond of you, he may be very useful, for they are very clever and handy." "I hope to make him useful," replied Humphrey, "but still I will not force him to do what he does not like. He is very fond of the pony already, and likes to take care of him. Bring him over to me, one of these days, so that he may know where to find me. It may prove of consequence if you have a message to send, and cannot come yourselves." "That is very true," reft Edward, "I will not forget it. Humphrey, shall you or I go with the cart?" "Humphrey, by all means. It will not do for them to suppose I had the cart from you, Edward. They do not know Humphrey, and he will be off again in the morning before they are up." "Very true," replied Edward. "And it is time for us to set off," replied Oswald. "Will Mistress Alice oblige me with something for my men to eat, for they have fasted the whole day?" "Yes," replied Alice, "I will have it ready before the pony is in the cart. Edith, dear, come with me." Humphrey then went out to harness the pony, and when all was ready, he and Oswald set off again. When they arrived at the pitfall, they found Corbould lying between the 2 other Verderers, who were sitting by his side. Corbould was much recovered since his wound had been bound up, and he was raised up and put on the fodder which Humphrey had put into the cart, and they proceeded on their journey to the other side of the forest, the Verderers eating what Humphrey had brought for them as they walked along. It was a tedious and painful journey for the wounded man, who shrieked out when the cart was jolted by the wheel getting into a rut or hole, but there was no help for it, and he was very much exhausted when they arrived, which was not till past midnight. Corbould was then taken to his cottage and put on the bed, and another verderer sent for a surgeon. Those who had been with Oswald were glad to go to bed, for it had been a fatiguing day. Humphrey remained with Oswald for 3 hours, and then again returned with Billy, who, although he had crossed the forest 3 times in the 24 hours, appeared quite fresh and ready to go back again. "I will let you know how he gets on, Humphrey, and what account he gives of his falling into the pit, but you must not expect me for a fortnight at least." Humphrey wished Oswald good-bye, and Billy was so anxious to get back to his stable that Humphrey could not keep him at a quiet pace. Horses, and all animals indeed, know that there is no place like home. It is a pity that men, who consider themselves much wiser, have not the same consideration, thought Humphrey as the pony trotted along. Humphrey thought a good deal about the danger that Edward had been subjected to, and said to himself, "I really think that I should be more comfortable if Edward was away. I am always in a fidget about him. I wish the new king, who is now in France, would raise an army and come over. It is better that Edward should be fighting in the field than remain here and risk being shot as a deer stealer, or put in prison. The farm is sufficient for us all, and when I have taken in more ground it will be more than sufficient, even if I do not kill the wild cattle. I am fit for the farm, but Edward is not. He is thrown away, living in this obscurity, and he feels it. He will always be in hot water some way or another, that is certain. What a narrow escape he has had with that scoundrel, and yet how little he cares for it. He was intended for a soldier, that is evident, and if ever he is one, he will be in his element, and distinguish himself, if it pleases God to spare his life. I'll persuade him to stay at home a little while to help me to enclose the other piece of ground, and after that is done, I'll dig a saw pit, and see if I can coax Pablo to saw with me. I must go to Lymington and buy a saw. If I once could get the trees sawed up into planks, what a quantity of things I could make, and how I could improve the place." Thus thought Humphrey as he went along. He was all for the farm and improvements, and was always calculating when he should have another calf or a fresh litter of pigs. His first idea was that he would make Pablo work hard, but the advice he had received from Oswald was not forgotten, and he now was thinking how he should coax Pablo into standing below in the saw pit, which was not only hard work, but disagreeable, from the sawdust falling into the eyes. Humphrey's cogitations were interrupted by a halloo, and turning round in the direction of the voice, he perceived Edward, and turned the cart to join him. "You're just come in time, Humphrey. I have some provision for us larder. I took my gun and came out on the path which I knew you would return on, and I have killed a young buck. He is good meat, and we are scarce of provisions." Humphrey helped Edward to put the venison in the cart, and they returned to the cottage, which was not more than 3 miles off. Humphrey told Edward the result of his journey, and then proposed that Edward should stop at home for a few days and help him with the new enclosure. To this Edward cheerfully consented, and as soon as they arrived at the cottage, and Humphrey had had his breakfast, they took their axes and went out to fell at a cluster of small spruce firs about a mile off. Chapter 14. "Now, Humphrey, what do you propose to do?" "This," replied Humphrey, "I have marked out 3 acres or thereabouts of the land running in a straight line behind the garden. There is not a tree on it, and it is all good feeding ground. What I intend to do is to enclose it with the spruce fir posts and rails that we are about to cut down, and then set a hedge upon a low bank which I shall raise all round inside the rails. I know where there are thousands of seedling thorns, which I shall take up in the winter, or early in the spring, to put in, as the bank will be ready for them by that time. Well, that's all very good, but I fear it will be a long while before you have such a quantity of land dug up. Yes, of course it will, but, Edward, I have plenty of manure to spare, and I shall put it all over this land, and then it will become a rich pasture, and also an earlier pasture than what we can get from the forest, and will be very handy to turn the cows and the calves upon, or even Billy, if we want him in a hurry. All that is very true, replied Edward, so that it will be useful, at all events, if you do not dig it up. Indeed it will, replied Humphrey. I only wish it were 6 acres instead of 3. I can't say I do, replied Edward, laughing. You are too grand in your ideas. Only think what a quantity of spruces we shall have to cut down on it, to post and rail what you just propose. Let it be 3 acres first, Humphrey, and when they are enclosed, you may begin to talk of 3 more. Well, perhaps you are right, Edward, said Humphrey. Why, here's Pablo coming after us. He's not coming to work, I presume, but to amuse himself by looking on. I don't think he is strong enough to do much hard work, Humphrey, although he appears very ingenious. No, I agree with you, and if he is to work, depend upon it must not be by having work set out for him. He would take a disgust to it directly. I have another plan for him. And what is that, Humphrey? I shall not set him anything to do, and shall make him believe that I do not think he is able to do anything. That will pique him, and I think by that means I shall get more work out of him than you would think, especially when, after he has done it, I express my wonder and give him praise. Not a bad idea, that. You will work upon his pride, which is probably stronger than his laziness. I do not think him lazy, but I think him unused to hard work, and, having lived a life of wandering and idleness, not very easy to be brought to constant and daily work, except by degrees, and by the means which I propose. Here we are, continued Humphrey, throwing his axe and billhook down, and proceeding to take off his doublet, now for an hour or two's fulfillment of the sentence of our first parents, to wit, the sweat of the brow. Edward followed Humphrey's example in taking off his doublet. They selected the long thin trees most fitted for rails, and were hard at work when Pablo came up to them. More than a dozen trees had fallen, and lay one upon the other, before they stopped a while to recover themselves a little. Well, Pablo, said Humphrey, wiping his forehead, I suppose you think looking on better than cutting down trees, and so it is. What cut down trees for? To make posts and rails to fence in more ground. I shall not leave the boughs on. No, cut them off by and by, and then put poles on the cart and carry them home. Edward and Humphrey then recommenced their labor, and worked for another half-hour, when they paused to recover their wind. Hard work, Pablo, said Humphrey. Yes, very hard work, Pablo not strong enough. Oh no, you are not able to do anything of this kind, I know. No work this for gypsies, they take birds' nests and catch rabbits. Yes, replied Pablo, nodding, and you eat them. So he does, Pablo, said Edward, so you are useful in your way, for if he had nothing to eat he would not be able to work. Strong man cut down trees, weak man catch rabbits. Both good, said Pablo. Yes, but strong man like work, not strong man not like work, Pablo. So now look on again, for we must have another spell. Strong man cut down trees, not strong man cut off branches, said Pablo, taking up the billhook and setting to work to cut off the boughs, which he did with great dexterity and rapidity. Edward and Humphrey exchanged glances and smiles, and then worked away in silence till it was, as they supposed, dinner time. They were not wrong in their supposition, although they had no other clock than their appetites, which, however, tell the time pretty correctly to those who work hard. Alice had the platters on the table, and was looking out to see if they were coming. "Why, Pablo, have you been at work?" said Edith. "Yes, little missy, work all the morning." "Indeed he has, and has worked very well, and been very useful," said Edward. "It has given you an appetite for your dinner, Pablo, has it not?" said Humphrey. "Have that without work," replied the boy. "Pablo, you are a very good gypsy boy," said Edith, patting his head with a patronizing air. "I shall let you walk out with me and carry the basket to put the eggs in when you come home in the evening." "That is a reward," said Humphrey, laughing. After dinner they continued their labor, and by supper time had so many trees cut down, that they determined to carry home the next day, and lay them along, to see how many more they would want. While they put the trees in the cart and took them home, Pablo contrived to lop off the boughs and prepare the poles for them to take away. As soon as they had cut down sufficient and carted them home, they then selected shorter trees for posts, and when Pablo had cleared them of the boughs, they sawed them out the proper lengths, and then carted them home. This occupied nearly the whole week, and then they proceeded to dig holes and set the posts in. The railing was then to be nailed to the posts, and that occupied them 3 days more, so that it was altogether a fortnight of hard work before the 3 acres were enclosed. "There," said Humphrey, "that's a good job over. Many thanks, Edward, for your assistance, and thank you too, Pablo, for you really have helped us very much indeed, and are a very useful, good boy. Now for raising the bank, that I must do when I can spare time, but my garden is overrun with weeds, and I must get Edith and Alice to help me there." "If you don't want me any longer, Humphrey," said Edward, "I think I shall go over to see Oswald, and take Pablo with me. I want to know how that fellow Corbould is, and what he says, and whether the intendant has come back. Not that I shall go near him or his good little daughter, but I think I may as well go, and it will be a good opportunity of showing Pablo the way to Oswald's cottage." "I think so too, and when you come back, Edward, one of us must go to Lymington, for I require some tools, and Pablo is very ragged. He must have some better clothes than these old ones of ours if he is to be sent messages. Don't you think so?" "Certainly I do." "And I want 1,000 things," said Alice. "Indeed, mistress, won't less than 1,000 content you?" "Yes, perhaps not quite 1,000, but I really do want a great many, and I will make you a list of them. I have not pans enough for my milk. I want salt. I want tubs, but I will make out a list, and you will find it a very long one." "Well, I hope you have something to sell to pay for them?" "Yes, I have plenty of butter salted down." "What have you, Edith?" "Oh, my chickens are not large enough yet. As soon as they are, Humphrey must get me some ducks and geese, for I mean to keep some, and by I will have some turkeys, but not yet. I must wait till Humphrey builds me the new house for them he has promised me." "I think you are right, Edith, about the ducks and geese. They will do well on the water behind the yard, and I will dig you out a bigger pool for them. Edith, my dear, your little fingers are just made to weed my onions well, and I wish you would do it tomorrow morning, if you have time. Yes, Humphrey, but my little fingers won't smell very nice afterwards. Not till you have washed them, I guess, but there is soap and water, you know. Yes, I know there is, but if I weed the onions I cannot help Alice to make the butter. However, if Alice can do without me I will do it. I want some more seeds sadly, said Humphrey, and I must make out my list. I must go to Lymington myself this time, Edward, for you will be puzzled with all our wants. Not if I know exactly what you do want, but as I really do not, and probably should make mistakes, I think it will be better if you do go. But it is bedtime, and as I shall start early, good night, sisters. I beg you will let me have something to eat before I start. I shall try for some venison, as I come back, and shall take Smoker with me. He is quite well again, and his ribs are as stout as ever. And, Edward, said Alice, I wish, when you kill any venison, that you would bring home some of those parts which you usually throw away, for I assure you, now that we have 3 dogs, I hardly know how to find enough for them to eat. I'll not fail, Alice, replied Edward, and now once more good night. Early the next morning Edward took his gun, and, with Pablo and Smoker, set off for Oswald's cottage. Edward talked a great deal with Pablo relative to his former life, and, by the answers which the boy gave him, was satisfied that, notwithstanding his doubtful way of bringing up, the lad was not corrupted, but was a well-minded boy. As they walked through a grove of trees, Edward still talking, Pablo stopped and put his hand before Edward's mouth, and then stooping down, at the same time seizing Smoker by the neck, he pointed with his finger. Edward at first could see nothing, but eventually he made out the horns of an animal just rising above a hillock. It was evidently one of the wild cattle. Edward cocked his gun and advanced cautiously, while Pablo remained where he was, holding Smoker. As soon as he was near enough to hit the head of the animal, Edward leveled and fired, and Pablo let Smoker loose, who bounded forward over the hillock. They followed the dog, and found him about to seize a calf which stood by a heifer that Edward had shot. Edward called him over and went up to the animal. It was a fine young heifer, and the calf was not more than a fortnight old. We cannot stop now, Pablo, said Edward. Humphrey would like to have the calf, and we must take our chance of its remaining by its mother till we come back. I think it will for a day or two, so let us push on. No further adventure happened, and they arrived a little after noon at Oswald's cottage. He was not at home, his wife saying that she believed that he was with the intendant, who had come back from London the day before. But I will put on my hood and see, said the young woman. In a few minutes she returned with Oswald. I am glad that you have come, sir, said Oswald, as Edward extended his hand, as I have just seen the intendant, and he has been asking many questions about you. I am certain he thinks that you are not the grandson of Jacob Armitage, and that he supposes I know who you are. He asked me where your cottage was, and whether I could not take him to it, as he wished to speak to you, and said that he felt great interest about you. And what did you say? I said that your cottage was a good day's journey from here, and I was not certain that I knew the exact way, as I had been there but seldom, but that I knew where to find it, after I saw the forests of Arnwood. I told him about Corbould and his attempt upon you, and he was very wroth. I never saw him moved before, and young Mistress Patience, She was indeed angry and perplexed, and begged her father to send the assailant away as soon as he could be moved. Master Heatherstone replied, "Leave it to me, my dear," and then asked me what account Corbould gave of himself and his falling into the pit. I told him that Corbould stated that he was following a deer, which he had severely wounded about noonday, and having no dog with him, he could not overtake it, although he knew by its bleeding track that it could not hold out much longer. That he followed it until nightfall, and had it in view and close to him when he fell into the pit. "Well, the story was not badly made up," said Edward, "only for a stag-red man, and what did the intendant say to that?" "He said that he believed you, and that Corbould's story was false, as, if it had been a stag that he was following, no one would have known that he had fallen into the pit, and he would have remained there till now. I quite forgot to say, that when the intendant said that he wished to call at your cottage, the young mistress said that she would go with him, as you had told her that you had 2 sisters living with you, and she wished very much to see them and make their acquaintance." "I am afraid that we shall not be able to prevent this visit, Oswald," replied Edward. "He is in command here, and the forest is in his charge. We must see to it. I only should like, if possible, to have notice of his coming, that we may be prepared." "You need no preparation, sir, if he should come," replied Oswald. "Very true," said Edward. "We have nothing to conceal, and if he finds us in a pickle it is of no consequence." "Rather the better, sir," replied Oswald. "Let your sisters be at the wash-tub, and you and your brother carting manure. He will then be more likely to have no suspicion of your being otherwise than what you assume to be." "Have you heard any news from London, Oswald?" "Not as yet. I was away yesterday evening, when Master Heatherstone came back, and I have not seen his man this morning. While you eat your dinner I will go into the kitchen, and if he is not there, Phoebe will be sure to tell me all that she has heard. Do not say that I am here, Oswald, as I do not wish to see the intendant." "Mum's the word, sir, but you must stay in the cottage, or others will see you, and it may come to his ears." Oswald's wife then put before him a large pie, and some wheaten bread, with a biggin of good beer. Edward helped Pablo to a large allowance, and then filled his own platter. While thus occupied, Oswald Partridge had left the cottage, as agreed. "What do you say, Pablo? Do you think you can walk back tonight?" "Yes. Like walking at night. My people always do, sleep in a daytime." "Well, I think it will be better to go home. Oswald has only one bed, and I do not wish them to know that I am here, so Pablo, eat heartily, and then we shall not be so tired. I want to get home, that I may send Humphrey after the calf." "One bed here, you stay," replied Pablo. "I go home and tell Master Humphrey." "Do you think you would be able to find your way, Pablo?" "Once go one way, always know same way again." "You are a clever fellow, Pablo, and I have a mind to try you. Now drink some beer. I think, Pablo, you shall go home, and tell Humphrey that I and Smoker will be where the heifer lies dead, and have it skinned by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so if he comes, he will find me there." "Yes, I go now." "No, not now, you must rest yourself a little more." "Pablo not tired," replied the gypsy, getting up, "be back before supper. As I go along, look at calf and dead cow, see if calf stay with mother." "Very well, then, if you wish it, you may go now," said Edward. Pablo nodded his head, and disappeared. A few minutes afterwards Oswald made his appearance. "Is the boy gone?" "Yes, he has gone back to the cottage," and Edward then stated how he had killed the heifer, and wanted to obtain the calf. "I've an idea that you will find that boy very useful, if he is properly managed." "I think so too," replied Edward, "and I am glad to perceive that he is already attached to all of us. We treat him as ourselves." "You are right, and now for the news that I have to tell you. The Duke Hamilton, the Earl of Holland, and Lord Capel have been tried, condemned, and executed." Edward sighed. "More murder. But we must expect it from those who have murdered their king." "Is that all?" "No. King Charles II has been proclaimed in Scotland, and invited to come over." "That is indeed news," replied Edward. "Where is he now?" "At The Hague, but it was said that he was going to Paris." "That is all that you have heard?" "Yes, that was what was current when Master Heatherstone was in town. His man Samson gave me the news, and he further said that his master's journey to London was to oppose the execution of the three lords, but it was all in vain." "Well," replied Edward, after a pause, "if the king does come over, there will be some work cut out for some of us, I expect." "Your news has put me in a fever," continued Edward, taking up the biggin and drinking a large draught of beer. "I thought it would," replied Oswald, "but until the time comes, the more quiet you keep the better." "Yes, Oswald, but I can't talk any more. I must be left alone to think. I will go to bed, as I shall be off early in the morning." "Is that fellow Corbould getting well?" "Yes, sir. He is out of bed, and walks a little with a stick, but he is still very lame, and will be for some time." "Good night, Oswald. If I have anything to say I will write and send the boy. I do not want to be seen here any more." "It will be best, sir. Good night. I will put Smoker in the kennel to the right, as he will not be friendly with the other dogs." Edward retired to bed, but not to sleep. The Scots had proclaimed the king, and invited him over. "He will surely come," thought Edward, "and he will have an army round him as soon as he lands." Edward made up his resolution to join the army as soon as he had heard that the king had landed, and what with considering how he should be able so to do, and afterwards building castles as to what he would do, it was long before he fell asleep. And when he did, he dreamt of battles and victory. He was charging at the head of his troops. He was surrounded by the dying and the dead. He was wounded, and he was somehow or another well again, as if by magic, and then the scene was changed, and he was rescuing Patience Heatherstone from his own lawless men, and preserving the life of her father, which was about to be sacrificed. And at last he awoke, and found that the daylight peeped through the windows, and that he had slept longer than he had intended to do. He arose and dressed himself quickly, and, not waiting for breakfast, went to the kennel, released Smoker from his durance, and set off on his return. Before 9 o'clock he had arrived at the spot where the heifer lay dead. He found the calf still by its side, bleeding and walking round uneasily. As he approached with the dog, it went to a farther distance, and there remained. Edward took out his knife, and commenced skinning the heifer, and then took out the inside. The animal was quite fresh and good, but not very fat, as may be supposed. While thus occupied, Smoker growled and then sprang forward, bounding away in the direction of the cottage, and Edward thought Humphrey was at hand. In a few minutes the pony and cart appeared between the trees, with Humphrey and Pablo in it, and Smoker leaping up at his friend Billy. "Good morning, Humphrey," said Edward. "I am almost ready for you. But the question is, how are we to take the calf? It is as wild as a deer." "It will be a puzzler. Without Smoker can run it down," said Humphrey. "I take him with Smoker," said Pablo. "How will you take it, Pablo?" Pablo went to the cart and took out a long small cord which Humphrey had brought with them, and made a noose at one end. He coiled the rope in his hand, and then threw it out to its full length, by way of trial. "This way I take him, suppose I get near enough. This way take bulls in Spain, call him Lasso. Now come with me." Pablo had his rope again coiled in his hand, and then went round to the other side of the calf, which still remained lowing at about 200 yards distance. "Now tell Smoker," cried Pablo. Humphrey set Smoker upon the calf, which retreated from the dog, presenting his head to run at it, and Pablo kept behind the animal, while Smoker attacked it, and drove it near to him. As soon as the calf, which was so busy with the dog that it did not perceive Pablo, came sufficiently near to him, Pablo threw his rope, and caught the loop round the animal's neck. The calf set off galloping towards Humphrey, and dragging Pablo after him, for the latter was not strong enough to hold it. Humphrey went to his assistance, and then Edward, and the calf was thrown down by Smoker, who seized it by the neck, and it was tied and put on the cart in a few minutes. "Well done, Pablo. You are a clever fellow," said Edward, "and this calf shall be yours." "It is a cow-calf," said Humphrey, "which I am glad of." "Pablo, you did that well, and, as Edward says, the calf belongs to you." Pablo looked pleased, but said nothing. The meat and hide were put into the cart with some of the offal which Alice had asked for the dogs, and they set off on their return home. Humphrey was very anxious to go to Lymington, and was not sorry that he had some meat to take with him. He determined to get off the next morning, and Edward proposed that he should take Pablo with him, that he might know the way there in case of any emergency, for they both felt that Pablo could be trusted. Edward said he would remain at home with his sisters, and see if he could be of any use to Alice. If not, there would be work in the garden. Humphrey and Pablo went away after breakfast, with Billy, and the meat and skin of the heifer in the cart. Humphrey had also a large basket of eggs and 3 dozen of chickens from Alice to be disposed of, and a list as long as the tail of a kite of articles which she and Edith required. Fortunately, there was nothing very expensive on the list, long as it was. But women in those days required needles, pins, buttons, tapes, thread, worsted, and 100 other little necessaries, as they do now. As soon as they were gone, Edward, who was still castle building instead of offering his services to Alice, brought out his father's sword and commenced cleaning it. When he had polished it up to his satisfaction, he felt less inclined than ever to do anything. So after dinner he took his gun and walked out into the forest, that he might indulge in his reveries. He walked on, quite unconscious of the direction in which he was going, and more than once finding his hat knocked off his head by the branch of a tree which he had not perceived, for the best of all possible reasons, because his eyes were cast on the ground, when his ears were saluted with the neighing of a horse. He looked up and perceived that he was near to a herd of forest ponies, the first that he had seen since he had lived in the forest. This roused him, and he looked about him. "Where can I have been wandering to?" thought Edward. "I never fell in with any of the forest ponies before. I must therefore have walked in a direction quite contrary to what I usually do. I do not know where I am, The scenery is new to me. What a fool I am. It's lucky that nobody except Humphrey digs pitfalls, or I should probably have been in one by this time, and I've brought out my gun and left the dog at home. Well, I suppose I can find my way back." Edward then surveyed the whole herd of ponies, which were at no great distance from him. There was a fine horse or two among them, which appeared to be the leaders of the herd. They allowed Edward to approach to within 200 yards, and then, with manes and tails streaming in the air, they darted off with the rapidity of the wind. "Now I'll puzzle Humphrey when I go back," thought Edward. "He says that Billy is getting old, and that he wishes he could get another pony. I will tell him what a plenty there are, and propose that he should invent some way of catching one. That will be a poser for him, yet I'm sure that he'll try, for he is very ingenious. And now which way am I to turn to find my way home? I think it ought to be to the north, but which is north? For there is no sun out, and now I perceive it looks very like rain. I wonder how long I have been walking. I'm sure I don't know." Edward then hurried in a direction which he considered might lead him homeward, and walked fast, but he once more fell into his habit of castle building, and was talking to himself. "The king proclaimed in Scotland. He will come over, of course. I will join his army, and then—" Thus he went on, again absorbed in the news which he had gained from Oswald, till on a sudden he again recollected himself, and perceived that he had lost sight of the copse of trees on a high hill, to which he had been directing his steps. Where was it? He turned round and round, and at last found out that he had been walking away from it. "I must dream no more," thought he, "or if I do indulge in any more daydreams, I certainly shall neither sleep nor dream tonight. It is getting dark already, and here am I lost in the forest, and all through my own foolishness. If the stars do not shine, I shall not know how to direct my steps. Indeed, if they do, I don't know whether I have walked south or north, and I am in a pretty pickle. Not that I care for being out in the forest on a night like this, but my sisters and Humphrey will be alarmed at my absence. The best thing I can do is to decide upon taking some straight line, and continue in it. I must then get out of the forest at last, even if I walk right across it. That will be better than going backwards and forwards, or round and round, as I otherwise shall do, just like a puppy running after its own tail. So now shine out, stars." Edward waited until he could make out Charles's wane, which he well knew, and then the polar star. As soon as he was certain of that, he resolved to travel by it due north, and he did so, sometimes walking fast, and at others keeping up a steady trot for half a mile without stopping. As he was proceeding on his travels, he observed, under some trees ahead of him, a spark of fire emitted. He thought it was a glowworm at first, but it was more like the striking of a flint against steel, and as he saw it a second time, he stopped, that he might ascertain what it might be before he advanced farther. Chapter 15. It was now very dark, as there was no moon, and the stars were often obscured by the clouds, which were heavy, and borne along by the wind, which was very high. The light again appeared, and this time Edward heard the clash of the flint against the steel, and he was certain that it was somebody striking a light. He advanced very cautiously, and arrived at a large tree, behind which he remained to reconnoiter. The people, whoever they might be, were not more than 30 yards from him. A light spread its rays for a moment or two, and he could make out a figure kneeling and holding his hat to protect it from the wind. Then it burnt brighter, and he saw that a lantern had been lighted, and then again, of a sudden, all was dark again. So Edward immediately satisfied himself that a dark lantern had been lighted and then closed. Who the parties might be he of course had no idea, but he was resolved that he would ascertain, if he could, before he accosted them and asked his way. "They have no dog," thought Edward, "or it would have growled before this, and it's lucky that I have none either." Edward then crept softly nearer to them. The wind, which was strong, blew from where they were to where Edward stood, so that there was less chance of their hearing his approach. Edward went on his hands and knees, and crawled through the fern until he gained another tree, and within 10 yards of them, and from where he could hear what they might say. He was thus cautious, as he had been told by Oswald that there were many disbanded soldiers who had taken up their quarters in the forest, and had committed several depredations upon the houses adjacent to it, always returning to the forest as a rendezvous. Edward listened, and heard one say, "It is not time yet." "No, no, too soon by half an hour or more. The people from Lymington who buy him what he wants always bring it to him at night, that his retreat may not be discovered. They sometimes do not leave the cottage till 2 hours after dark, for they do not leave Lymington to go there till it is dark." "Do you know who it is who supplies him with food?" "Yes, the people at the inn in Parliament Street, I forget the sign." "Oh, I know. Yes, the landlord is a downright malignant in his heart. We might squeeze him well, if we dared show ourselves in Lymington." "Yes, but they would squeeze our necks tighter than would be agreeable, I expect," replied the other. "Are you sure that he has money?" "Quite sure, for I peeped through the chinks of the window shutters, and I saw him pay for the things brought to him. It was from a canvas bag, and it was gold that he took out." "And where did he put the bag after he had paid them?" "That I can't tell, for as I knew that they would come out as soon as they were paid, I was obliged to beat a retreat, lest I should be seen." "Well, then, how is it to be managed?" "We must first tap at the door, and try if we can get in as benighted travelers. If that won't do, and I fear it will not, while you remain begging for admittance at the door, and keep him occupied, I will try the door behind, that leads into the garden, and if not the door, I will try the window. I have examined them both well, and have been outside when he has shut up his shutters, and I know the fastenings. With a pane out, I could open them immediately." "Is there anybody else besides him in the cottage?" "Yes, a lad who attends him, and goes to Lymington for him." "No women?" "Not one." "But do you think we two are sufficient? Had we not better get more help?" "There is Broom, and Black, the gypsy, at the rendezvous. I can go for them, and be back in time. They are stout and true." "Stout enough, but not true." "No, no, I want no sharers in this business, and you know how ill they behaved in the last affair. I'll swear that they only produced half the swag. I like honor between gentlemen and soldiers, and that's why I have chosen you. I know I can trust you, Benjamin. It's time now, what do you say? We are 2 to 1, for I count the boy as nothing. Shall we start? I am with you. You say there's a bag of gold, and that's worth fighting for. Yes, Ben, and I'll tell you, with what I've got buried, and my share of that bag, I shall have enough, I think, and I'll start for the Low Countries, for England's getting rather too warm for me. Well, I shan't go yet, replied Benjamin. I don't like your foreign parts, they have no good ale, and I can't understand their talk. I'd sooner remain in jolly old England with a halter twisted ready for me, than pass my life with such a set of chaps who drink nothing but skydom, and wear 20 pair of breeches. Come, let's be off. If we get the money, you shall go to the Low Countries, Will, and I'll start for the north, where they don't know me, for if you go, I won't stay here." The two men then rose up, and the one whose name appeared to be Will, first examined if the candle in his dark lantern burnt well, and then they both set off, followed by Edward, who had heard quite enough to satisfy him that they were bent upon a burglary, if not murder. Edward followed them, so as to keep their forms indistinctly in sight, which was as much as he could do at 20 yards distance. Fortunately, the wind was so high that they did not hear his footsteps, although he often trod upon a rotten stick, which snapped as it broke in twain. As near as Edward could guess, he had tracked them for about 3 miles, when they stopped, and he perceived that they were examining their pistols, which they took from their belts. They then went on again, and entered a small plantation of oak trees, of about 40 years' growth, very thick and very dark, with close underwood below. They followed each other through a narrow path, until they came to a cleared place in the middle of the plantation, in which there stood a low cottage, surrounded with covert on every side, with the exception of some 30 yards of land around it. All was still, and as dark as pitch. Edward remained behind the trees, and when the two men again stopped, he was not 6 feet from them. They consulted in a low tone, but the wind was so high that he could not distinguish what they said. At last they advanced to the cottage, and Edward, still keeping within the trees, shifted his position so that he should be opposite the gable end of the cottage. He observed one man to go up to the front door, while the other went round to the door behind, as had been agreed. Edward threw open the pan of the lock of the gun, and reprimed it, that he might be sure, and then waited for what was to follow. He heard the man Will at the front door, talking and asking for shelter in a plaintive but loud voice, and shortly afterwards he perceived a light through the chinks of the shutters, for Edward was continually altering his position to see what was going on in the front and in the back. At one time he thought of leveling his gun and killing one of the men at once, but he could not make up his mind to do that, as a burglary, although intended, had not yet been committed, so he remained passive until the attack was really made, when he resolved that he would come to the rescue. After some minutes of entreaty that they would open the door, the man in front commenced thumping and beating against it, as if he would make them open the door by force, but this was to attract the attention of those within, and divert it from the attempts that the other was making to get in behind. Edward was aware of this. He now kept his eye upon what was going on at the back. Advancing nearer, which he ventured to do now that both the men were so occupied, he perceived that the fellow had contrived to open the window close to the back door, and was remaining quite close to it with a pistol in his hand, apparently not wishing to run the risk of climbing in. Edward slipped under the eaves of the cottage, not 6 feet from the man, who remained with his back partly turned towards him. Edward, then finding he had obtained this position unperceived, crouched down with his gun ready pointed. As Edward remained in this position, he heard a shrill voice cry out, "They are getting in behind," and a movement in the cottage. The man near him, who had his pistol in his hand, put his arm through the window and fired inside. A shriek was given, and Edward fired his gun into the body of the man, who immediately fell. Edward lost no time in reloading his gun, during which he heard the bursting open of the front door and the report of firearms. Then all was silent for a moment, excepting the wailing of somebody within. As soon as his gun was reloaded, Edward walked round to the front of the cottage, where he found the man who was called Ben lying across the threshold of the open door. He stepped across the body, and, looking into the room within, perceived a body stretched on the floor, and a young lad weeping over it. "Don't be alarmed, I am a friend," said Edward, going in to where the body lay, and taking the light which was at the farther end of the chamber, he placed it on the floor, that he might examine the state of the person who was breathing heavily, and apparently badly wounded. "Rise up, my lad," said Edward, "and let me see if I can be of any use." "Ah, no," cried the boy, throwing back his long hair from his temples, "he bleeds to death." "Bring me some water quick," said Edward, "there's a good lad, while I see where he is hurt." The boy ran up to fetch the water, and Edward discovered that the ball had entered the neck, above the collarbone, and that the blood poured out of the man's mouth, who was choking with the effusion. Although ignorant of surgery, Edward thought that such a wound must be mortal, but the man was not only alive but sensible, and although he could not utter a word, he spoke with his eyes and with signs. He raised his hand and pointed to himself first, and shook his head, as if to say that it was all over with him, and then he turned round his head, as if looking for the lad, who was now returning with the water. When the lad again knelt by his side, weeping bitterly, the man pointed to him, and gave such an imploring look that Edward immediately comprehended what he wished. It was to ask protection for the boy. It could not be misunderstood, and could Edward do otherwise than promise it to the dying man? His generous nature could not refuse it, and he said, "I understand you. You wish me to take care of your boy when you are gone. Is it not so?" The man signified assent. "I promise you I will do so. I will take him into my own family, and he shall share with us." The man raised his hand again, and a gleam of joy passed over his features as he took the hand of the lad and put it into that of Edward. His eyes were then fixed upon Edward, as if to scrutinize into his character by his features, while the former bathed his temples and washed the blood from his mouth with the water brought by the boy, who appeared in a state of grief so violent as to paralyze his senses. After a minute or two another effusion of blood choked the wounded man, who, after a short struggle, fell back dead. "He is gone," thought Edward, "and now what is to be done? I must first ascertain whether the two villains are dead or not." Edward took a light and examined the body of Ben, lying over the threshold of the door. The man was quite dead, the ball having entered his brain. He was proceeding round the outside of the cottage to examine the state of the other man, whom he had shot himself, but the wind nearly blew out the light, and he therefore returned to the chamber and placed it on the floor, near to where the boy lay insensible over the corpse of the man who had died in the arms of Edward, and then went out without a light, and with his gun, to the other side of the cottage, where the other robber had fallen. As he approached the man, a faint voice was heard to say, "Ben, Ben, some water, for the love of God." "Ben, I'm done for." Edward, without giving an answer, went back to the room for the water, which he took round to the man, and put it to his lips. He felt that he was bound by humanity so to do to a dying man, scoundrel though he might be. It was still dark, but not so dark as it had previously been, for the late moon was just rising. The man drank the water eagerly, and said, "Ben, I can speak now, but I shan't long." He then pulled the basin towards him again, and after he had drunk, he said in broken sentences, "I feel that I am bleeding to death, inside." Then he paused. You know the oak struck by lightning a mile north of this. Oh, I'm going fast. 3 yards from it south, I buried all my money. It's yours. Oh, another drink. The man again attempted to drink out of the basin proffered by Edward, but as he made the attempt he fell back with a groan. Edward, perceiving that he was dead, returned to the cottage to look after the lad, who still remained prostrate and embracing the corpse in the chamber. Edward then reflected upon what had best be done. After a time he decided upon dragging away the body of the robber named Ben outside of the threshold, and then securing the door. This, with some trouble, he effected, and he then made fast the window that had been forced open behind. Before he removed the boy, who lay with his face buried on the corpse, and appeared to be in a state of insensibility, Edward examined the corpse as it lay. Although plainly dressed, yet it was evident that it was not the body of a rustic. The features were fair, and the beard was carefully cut, the hands were white, and the fingers long, and evidently had never been employed in labor. That the body was that of some superior person disguised as a rustic was evident, and this was corroborated by the conversation which took place between the two robbers. Alas, thought Edward, the family of Arnwood appear not to be the only people who are in disguise in this forest. That poor boy! He must not remain there. Edward looked round, and perceived that there was a bed in the adjoining room, the door of which was open. He lifted up the boy, and carried him, still insensible, into the room, and laid him on the bed. He then went for some more water, which he found and threw into his face, and poured a little into his mouth. Gradually the boy stirred, and recovered from his stupor, and then Edward held the water to his mouth, and made him drink some, which he did, and then, suddenly aroused to a recollection of what had passed, the boy gave a shriek of woe, and burst into a paroxysm of tears. This ended in convulsive sobbings and low moanings. Edward felt that he could do no more at present, and that it would be better if he was left for a time to give vent to his grief. Edward sat down on the stool by the side of the orphan, and remained for some time in deep and melancholy thought. How strange, thought he at last, it is, that I should feel so little as I do now, surrounded by death, compared to what I did when good old Jacob Armitage died. Then I felt it deeply, and there was an awe in death. Now I no longer dread it. Is it because I loved the good old man, and felt that I had lost a friend? No, that cannot be the cause. I may have felt more grief, but not awe or dread. Or is it because that was the first time that I had seen death, and it is the first sight of death which occasions awe? Or is it because that every day I have fancied myself on the battlefield, with hundreds lying dead and wounded around me, in my dreamings? I know not. Poor old Jacob died peaceably in his bed, like a good Christian, and trusting, after a blameless life, to find mercy through his Savior. 2 of these who are now dead, out of the 3, have been summoned away in the height of their wickedness, and in the very commission of crime. The 3rd has been foully murdered, and out of 3 lying dead, 1 has fallen by my own hand. And yet I feel not so much as when I attended the couch, and listened to the parting words of a dying Christian. I cannot account for it, or reason why. I only know that it is so, and I now look upon death unconcerned. Well, this is a kind of preparation for the wholesale murder and horrors of the battlefield, which I have so long sighed for. God forgive me if I am wrong. And this poor boy, I have promised to protect him, and I will. Could I fail my promise, I should imagine the spirit of his father, as I presume he was, looking down and upbraiding me. No, no, I will protect him. I and my brother and sisters have been preserved and protected, and I were indeed vile if I did not do to others as I have been done by. And now let me reflect what is to be done. I must not take the boy away, and bury the bodies. This person has friends at Lymington, and they will come here. The murder has taken place in the forest, then I must let the intendant know what has occurred. I will send over to Oswald. Humphrey shall go. Poor fellow! What a state of anxiety must he and my little sisters be in at my not returning home. I had quite forgotten that, but it cannot be helped. I will wait till sunrise, and then see if the boy will be more himself, and probably from him I shall be able to find out what part of the forest I am in. Edward took up the candle and went into the room in which he had laid the boy on the bed. He found him in a sound sleep. Poor fellow, said Edward, he has for a time forgotten his misery. What a beautiful boy he is! I long to know his history. Sleep on, my poor fellow. It will do you service. Edward then returned to the other room, and recollected, or rather was reminded, that he had had no supper, and it was now nearly dawn of day. He looked into a cupboard and found plenty of provisions and some flasks of wine. I have earned my supper, thought he, and I will not, therefore, deny myself. So he brought out the viands and a flask of wine, and made a hearty meal. It is long since I have tasted wine, thought he, and it may be long ere I drink it again. I have little relish for it now. It is too fiery to the palate. I recollect, when a child, how my father used to have me at the table, and give me a stoup of claret, which I could hardly lift to my lips, to drink to the health of the king. The memory of the king raised other thoughts in Edward's mind, and he again sank into one of his reveries, which lasted till he fell into a slumber. When he woke up, it was at the voice of the boy, who in his sleep had cried out, "Father!" Edward started up, and found that the sun was an hour high, and that he must have slept some time. He gently opened the cottage door, looked at the bodies of the two men, and then walked out to survey the locality of the cottage, which he had but faintly made out during the night. He found that it was surrounded by a thicket of trees and underwood, so close and thick that there appeared to him no outlet in any direction. What a place for concealment, thought Edward, but still these prowling thieves discovered it. Why, troops of horse might scour the forest for months, and never discover such a hiding place. Edward walked round by the side of the thicket, to find out the track by which the robbers had entered when he followed them, and at last succeeded in doing so. He followed the path through the thicket until he was clear of it and again in the forest, but the scenery outside was unknown to him, and he had not an idea as to what part of the forest it was in. I must question the boy, thought Edward. I will go back and wake him up, for it is time that I was moving. As he was again turning into the thicket, he heard a dog giving tongue, as if on a scent. It came nearer and nearer to him, and Edward remained to see what it might be. In a moment more he perceived his own dog, Smoker, come bounding out of a neighboring copse, followed by Humphrey and Pablo. Edward hallooed. Smoker sprang towards him, leaping up, and loading him with caresses, and in another moment he was in Humphrey's arms. "Oh, Edward, let me first thank God," said Humphrey, as the tears started and rolled down his cheeks. "What a night we have passed! What has happened? That dear fellow Pablo thought of putting Smoker on the scent. He brought out your jacket and showed it to Smoker, and gave it him to smell, and then led him along till he was on your footsteps, and the dog followed him, it seems, although it has been round and round in every direction, till at last he has brought us to you. Edward shook hands with Pablo, and thanked him. How far are we from the cottage, Humphrey? About 8 miles, I should say, Edward, not more. Well, I have much to tell you, and I must tell it to you in few words before I go farther, and afterwards I will tell you all in detail. Edward then gave a succinct narration of what had occurred, and, having thus prepared Humphrey and Pablo for what they were to see, led the way back through the thicket to the cottage inside of it. Humphrey and Pablo were much shocked at the scene of slaughter which presented itself to their eyes, and, after having viewed the bodies, they began to consult what had best be done. The proposal of Edward, that Humphrey should go over and make known the circumstances to Oswald, that they might be communicated to the intendant, was readily acceded to, and Pablo, it was agreed, should go home and tell Alice and Edith that Edward was safe. But now, Humphrey, about this boy, we cannot leave him here. Where is he? He still sleeps, I believe. The question is, whether you should ride over with the pony or walk, and leave Pablo to return with the pony and cart, for I will not take the boy away or leave the house myself without removing the property which belongs to the boy, and of which I will make inquiry when he wakes. Besides, there is money, by what the robbers stated, which of course must be taken care of for him. I think it will be best for me to walk over, Edward. If I ride, I should arrive too late in the afternoon for anything to be done till next morning, and if I walk, I shall be in time enough, so that is settled. Besides, it will give you more time to remove the boy's property, which, as his father was in all probability a malignant, and a denounced man, they might think right to secure for the government. Very true, then be it so. Do you start for the intendant's, and Pablo, go home and fetch the pony and cart, while I remain here with the boy, and get everything ready. Humphrey and Pablo both set off, and then Edward went to waken the boy, still lying on the bed. Come, you must get up now. You know that what's done cannot be undone, and if you are a good boy, and have read the Bible, you must know that we must submit to the will of God, who is our kind Father in heaven. Ah me, said the boy, who was awake when Edward went to him, I know well it is my duty, but it is a hard duty, and I am heartbroken. I have lost my father, the only friend I had in the world, who was there to love and to cherish me now. What will become of me? I promised your father, before he died, that I would take care of you, my poor fellow, and a promise is sacred with me, even if it were not made to a dying man. I will do my best, depend upon it, for I have known myself what it is to want and to find a protector. You shall live with me and my brother and sisters, and you shall have all we have. Have you sisters, then? Replied the boy. Yes, I have sent for the cart to take you away from this, and tonight you shall be in our cottage. But now tell me, I do not ask who your father was, or why he was living here in secret, as I found it out by what I overheard the robbers say to one another. But how long have you lived here? More than a year. Whose cottage is it? My father bought it when he came, as he thought it safer so, that he might not be discovered or betrayed, for he had escaped from prison after having been condemned to death by the Parliament. Then he was a loyal man to his king? Yes, he was, and that was his only crime. Then fear not, my good boy, We are all loyal as well as he was, and will never be otherwise. I tell you this that you may safely trust to us. Now, if the cottage was his, the furniture and property were his also. Yes, all was his. And it is now yours, is it not? I suppose so, said the boy, bursting into tears. Then listen to me. Your father is safe from all persecution now. He is, I trust, in heaven, and you they cannot touch, as you have done nothing to offend them, but still they will take possession of your father's property as soon as they know of his death, and find out who he was. This, for your sake, I wish to prevent them from doing, and have therefore sent for the cart, that I may remove to my cottage everything that is of value, that it may be held for your benefit. Some day or another you may require it. The murder having been committed in the forest, and I having been a witness, and, moreover, having shot one of the robbers, I have considered it right to send over to the intendant of the forest to give him notice of what has taken place within his jurisdiction. I do not think he is so bad a man as the rest, but still, when he comes here, he may consider it his duty to take possession of everything for the Parliament, as I have no doubt such are his orders, or will be when he communicates with the Parliament. Now this is a robbery which I wish to prevent, by carrying away your property before they come over, which they will tomorrow, and I propose that you shall accompany me, with all that you can take away, or that may be useful, this evening. You are very kind, replied the boy. I will do all you wish, but I feel very weak, and very unwell. You must exert yourself for your own sake, my poor fellow. Come, now, sit up and put all your own clothes together. Collect everything in this room, while I look about the house. And tell me, had not your father some money? For the robbers said that they saw him counting it out of a sack, through the chinks of the shutters, and that was why they made the attack. Hateful money, cried the boy. Yes, he had, I believe, a great deal of money, but I cannot say how much. Now get up, and do as I request, my dear boy, said Edward, raising him up in his arms. When your grief is lessened, you may have many happy days yet in store for you. You have a Father in heaven that you must put your trust in, and with him you will find peace. The boy rose up, and Edward closed the door of the chamber, that he might not see his father's corpse. I do put my trust in heaven, good sir, replied the boy, for it has already sent me a kind friend in my distress. You are good, I am sure, I see that in your face. Alas! How much more wretched would have been my condition if you had not fortunately come to our assistance. Too late, indeed, to save my poor father, but not too late to succor and console his child. I will go away with you, for I cannot stay here. Chapter 16. Edward then took the counterpane off the bed, and went with it into the next room. He gently drew the body to the corner of the room, and covered it up with the counterpane, and then proceeded to examine the cupboards, etc. In one he found a good store of books, in another there was linen of all sorts, a great many curious arms, 2 suits of bright armor such as worn in those times, pistols and guns, and ammunition. On the floor of one of the cupboards was an iron chest about 2 feet by 18 inches. It was locked. Edward immediately concluded that this chest held the money of the unfortunate man, but where was the key? Most likely about his person. He did not like to afflict the poor boy by putting the question to him, but he went to the body and examined the pockets of the clothes. He found a bunch of several keys, which he took, and then replaced the coverlid. He tried one of the keys, which appeared to be of the right size, to the lock of the iron chest, and found that it fitted it. Satisfied with this, he did not raise the lid of the chest, but dragged it out into the center of the room. There were many things of value about the room. The candlesticks were silver, and there were goblets of the same metal. Edward collected all these articles, and a timepiece, and put them into a basket, of which there were two large ones at the end of the room, apparently used for holding firewood. Everything that he thought could be useful, or of value, he gathered together for the benefit of the poor orphan boy. He afterwards went into another small room, where he found sundry small trunks and cases locked up. These he brought out without examining, as he presumed that they contained what was of value, or they would not be locked. When he had collected everything, he found that he had already more than the cart could carry in one trip, and he wanted to take some bedding with him, as he had not a spare bed in the cottage to give to the boy. Edward decided in his own mind that he would take the most valuable articles away that night, and return with the cart for the remainder early on the following morning. It was now past noon, and Edward took out of the cupboard what victuals were left, and then went into the chamber where the boy was, and begged that he would eat something. The poor boy said that he had no appetite, but Edward insisted, and at last prevailed upon him to eat some bread and drink a glass of wine, which proved of great service to him. The poor fellow shuddered as he saw the body covered up in the corner of the room, but said nothing. Edward was trying to make him eat a little more, when Pablo made his appearance at the door. "Have you put up all that you want in the bedchamber?" said Edward. "Yes, I have put up everything." "Then we will bring them out." "Come, Pablo, you must help us." Pablo made signs, and pointed to the door. Edward went out. "First pull body away from this." "Yes," replied Edward, "we must do so." Edward and Pablo pulled the body of the robber on one side of the doorway, and threw over it some dried fern which lay by. They then backed the cart down to the door. The iron chest was first got in, then all the heavy articles, such as armor, guns, and books, etc., and by that time the cart was more than half loaded. Edward then went into the chamber, and brought out the packages the boy had made up, and put them all in the cart until it was loaded high up. They brought out some blankets, and laid over all, to keep things steady, and then Edward told the boy that all was ready, and that they had better go. "Yes, I am willing," replied he, with streaming eyes, "but let me see him once more." "Come, then," said Edward, leading him to the corpse, and uncovering the face. The boy knelt down, kissed the forehead and cold lips, covered up the face again, and then rose and wept bitterly on Edward's shoulder. Edward did not attempt to check his sorrow. He thought it better it should have vent, but, after a time, he led the boy by degrees till they were out of the cottage. "Now, then," said Edward, "we must go, or we shall be late. My poor little sisters have been dreadfully alarmed at my not having come home last night, and I long to clasp them in my arms." "Indeed you must," replied the boy, wiping away his tears, "and I am very selfish. Let us go on." "No room for cart to get through wood," said Pablo. "Hard work. Cart empty, more hard work. Cart full." And so it proved to be, and it required all the united efforts of Billy, Edward, and Pablo, to force a passage for the cart through the narrow pathway. But at last it was effected, and then they went on at a quick pace, and in less than 2 hours the cottage was in sight. When within 200 yards of it, Edith, who had been on the watch, came bounding out, flew into Edward's arms, and covered him with kisses. "You naughty Edward, to frighten us so. Look, Edith, I have brought you a nice little playfellow. Welcome him, dearest." Edith extended her hand as she looked into the boy's face. "He is a pretty boy, Edward, much prettier than Pablo." "No, Missy Edith," said Pablo. "Pablo more man than he?" "Yes, you may be more man, Pablo, but you are not pretty." "And where is Alice?" "She was getting supper ready, and I did not tell her that I saw you coming, because I wanted first kiss." "You little jealous thing." "But here comes Alice." "Dear Alice, you have been very uneasy, but it was not my fault," said Edward, kissing her. "If I had not been where I was, this poor boy would have been killed as well as his father. Make him welcome, Alice, for he is an orphan now, and must live with us. I have brought many things in the cart, and tomorrow we will bring more, for we have no bed for him, and tonight he must sleep with me. We will make him as happy as we can, Edward, and we will be sisters to him," said Alice, looking at the boy, who was blushing deeply. "How old are you? And what is your name?" "I am 13 years old next January," replied the boy. "And your Christian name?" "I will tell you by and by," replied he, confused. They arrived at the cottage, and Edward and Pablo were busy unpacking the cart and putting all the contents into the inner chamber, where Pablo now slept, when Alice, who, with Edith, had been talking to the boy, came to Edward and said, "Edward, she's a girl." "A girl?" replied Edward, astonished. "Yes, she has told me so, and wished me to tell you." "But why does she wear boys' clothes?" "It was her father's wish, as he was very often obliged to send her to Lymington to a friend's house, and he was afraid of her getting into trouble. But she has not told me her story as yet. She says that she will tonight." "Well, then," replied Edward, "you must make up a bed for her in your room tonight. Take Pablo's bed, and he shall sleep with me. Tomorrow morning I will bring some more bedding from her cottage." "How Humphrey will be surprised when he comes back," said Alice, laughing. "Yes, she will make a nice little wife for him some years hence, and she may prove an heiress perhaps, for there is an iron chest with money in it." Alice returned to her new companion, and Edward and Pablo continued to unload the cart. "Well, Pablo, I suppose you will allow that, now that you know she is a girl, she is handsomer than you?" "Oh yes," replied Pablo, "very handsome girl, but too much girl for handsome boy." At last everything was out of the cart, the iron chest dragged into Pablo's room, and Billy put into his stable and given his supper, which he had well earned, for the cart had been very heavily loaded. They then all sat down to supper, Edward saying to their new acquaintance, "So I find that I am to have another sister instead of another brother. Now you will tell me your name?" "Yes, Clara is my name." "And why did you not tell me that you are a girl?" "I did not like, because I was in boy's clothes, and felt ashamed. Indeed, I was too unhappy to think about what I was. My poor dear father," and she burst into tears. Alice and Edith kissed her and consoled her, and she became calm again. After supper was over they busied themselves making arrangements for her sleeping in their room, and then they went to prayers. "We have much to be thankful for, my dears," said Edward. "I am sure I feel that I have been in great danger, and I only wish that I had been more useful than I have been, but it has been the will of God, and we must not arraign his decrees. Let us return thanks for his great mercies, and bow in submission to his dispensations, and pray that he will give peace to poor little Clara, and soften her affliction. And as Edward prayed, little Clara knelt and sobbed, while Alice caressed her with her arm round her waist, and at times stopped her prayer to kiss and console her. When they had finished, Alice led her away to her bedroom, followed by Edith, and they put her to bed. Edward and Pablo also retired, both worn out by the fatigue and excitement of the day. They were up on the following morning at day-dawn, and, putting Billy in the cart, set off for the cottage of Clara. They found everything as they had left it, and, having loaded the cart with what had been left behind the day before, the bedding for 2 beds, with several articles of furniture which Edward thought might be useful, there being still a little room left, Edward packed up in a wooden case with dried fern all the wine that was in the cupboard, and, having assisted Pablo in forcing the cart once more through the path in the wood, he left him to return home with the cart, while he remained to wait the arrival of Humphrey, and whoever might come with him from the intendants. About 10 o'clock, as he was watching outside of the wood, he perceived several people approaching him, and soon made out that Humphrey, the intendant, and Oswald were among the number. When they came up to him, Edward saluted the intendant in a respectful manner, shook hands with Oswald, and then led the way by the narrow path through the wood to the cottage. The intendant was on horseback, but all the rest were on foot. The intendant left his horse to the care of one of the verderers, and went through the wood on foot with the of the party, preceded by Edward. He appeared to be very grave and thoughtful, and Edward thought that there was a coolness in his manner towards himself, for it must be recollected that Mr. Heatherstone had not seen Edward since he had rendered him such service in saving the life of his daughter. The consequence was that Edward felt somewhat indignant, but he did not express his feelings, by his looks even, but conveyed the party in silence to the cottage. On their arrival, Edward pointed to the body of the robber, which had been covered with fern, and the verderers exposed it. "By whose hand did that man fall?" said the intendant. "By the hand of the party who lived in the cottage." Edward then led the way round to the back of the cottage where the other robber lay. "And this man was slain by my hand," replied Edward. "We have one more body to see," continued Edward, leading the way into the cottage and uncovering the corpse of Clara's father. Mr. Heatherstone looked at the face and appeared much moved. "Cover it up," said he, turning away, and then sitting down on a chair close to the table. "And how was this found?" he said. "I neither saw this person killed nor the robber you first saw, but I heard the report of the firearms at almost the same moment, and I presume that they fell by each other's hands." The intendant called his clerk, who had accompanied him, and desired him to get ready his writing materials, and then said, "Edward Armitage, we will now take down your deposition as to what has occurred." Edward then commenced by stating that he was out in the forest and had lost his way, and was seeking his way home. "You were out in the forest during the night?" "Yes, sir, I was." "With your gun?" "I always carry my gun," replied Edward. "In pursuit of game?" "No, sir, I was not. I have never been out in pursuit of game during nighttime in my life." "What were you then about?" "You did not go out for nothing?" "I went out to commune with my own thoughts. I was restless, and I wandered about without knowing where I went, and that is the reason why I lost my way." "And pray what may have excited you?" "I will tell you. I was over with Oswald Partridge the day before. You had just arrived from London, and he gave me the news that King Charles had been proclaimed in Scotland, and that news unsettled me." "Well, proceed." Edward met with no more interruption in his narrative. He stated briefly all that had taken place, from the time he fell in with the robbers till the winding up of the catastrophe. The clerk took down all that Edward had stated, and then read it over to him, to ascertain if he had written it down correctly, and then inquired of Edward if he could read and write. "I should hope so," replied Edward, taking the pen and signing his name. The clerk stared, and then said, "People in your condition do not often know how to read and write, Mr. Forester, and therefore you need not be offended at the question." "Very true," replied Edward. "May I ask if my presence is considered any longer to be necessary?" "You stated that there was a boy in the house, young man," said the intendant. "What has become of him?" "He is removed to my cottage." "Why did you do so?" "Because when his father died I promised to him that I would take care of his child, and I intend to keep my word." "You had spoken with him, then, before he died," said the intendant. "Not so. It was all carried on by signs on his part, but it was as intelligible as if he spoke, and what I replied he well understood, and I really think I removed a great anxiety off his mind by giving him the promise." The intendant paused, and then said, "I perceive that some articles have been removed, the bedding, for instance. Have you taken anything away?" "I have removed bedding, for I had no bed to offer to the lad, and he told me that the cottage and furniture belonged to his father. Of course by his father's death it became his, and I felt that I was warranted in so doing." "May I ask, did you remove any papers?" "I cannot tell. The lad packed up his own things. There were some boxes removed, which were locked up, and the contents are to me wholly unknown. I could not leave the boy here in this scene of death, and I could not well leave the property belonging to him to be at the mercy of any other plunderers of the forest. I did as I considered right for the benefit of the boy, and in accordance with the solemn promise which I made to his father. Still, the property should not have been removed. The party who now lies dead there is a well-known malignant." "How do you know that, sir?" interrupted Edward. "Did you recognize him when you saw the body?" "I did not say that I did," replied the intendant. "You either must have so done, sir," replied Edward, "or you must have been aware that he was residing in this cottage. You have to choose between." "You are bold, young man," replied the intendant, "and I will reply to your observation. I did recognize the party when I saw his face, and I knew him to be one who was condemned to death, and who escaped from prison a few days before the one appointed for his execution. I heard search had been made for him, but in vain, and it was supposed that he had escaped beyond the seas. Now his papers may be the means of giving the Parliament information against others as well as himself, and enable them to commit a few more murders," added Edward. "Silence, young man. The authorities must not be spoken of in so irreverent a manner. Are you aware that your language is treasonable?" "According to Act of Parliament, as at present constituted, it may be," replied Edward, "but as a loyal subject of King Charles II, I deny it." "I have no concern with your loyalty, young man, but I will not admit any language to be uttered in my presence against the ruling powers. The inquest is over. Let everyone leave the house except Edward Armitage, to whom I would speak alone." "Excuse me one moment, sir," said Edward, "and I will return." Edward went out with the rest, and calling Humphrey aside, said to him, contrive to slip away unperceived. Here are the keys. Haste to the cottage as fast as you can. Look for all the papers you can find in the packages taken there. Bury them in the iron chest in the garden, or anywhere where they cannot be discovered." Humphrey nodded, and turned away, and Edward re-entered the cottage. He found the intendant was standing over the corpse. He had removed the coverlid, and was looking mournfully down on the face disfigured with blood. Perceiving the entrance of Edward, he again took his seat at the table, and after a pause said, "Edward Armitage, that you have been brought up very superior to your station in life is certain, and that you are loyal, bold, and resolute, is equally so. You have put me under an obligation which I never can repay, even if you allowed me to exert myself in your behalf. I take this opportunity of acknowledging it, and now allow me to say that for these times you are much too frank and impetuous. This is no time for people to give vent to their feelings and opinions. Even I am as much surrounded with spies as others, and am obliged to behave myself accordingly. Your avowed attachment to the King's cause has prevented me from showing that more than cordiality that I really feel for you, and to which you are in every way entitled. I cannot conceal my opinions, sir. I was brought up in the house of a loyal cavalier, and never will be otherwise. Granted, why should you be? But do you not yourself see that you do the cause more harm than good by thus avowing your opinions when such avowal is useless? If any other man in the county, who is of your opinion, was to express himself, now that your cause is hopeless, as you have done, the prisons would be crowded, the executions would be daily, and the cause would be in proportion weakened by the loss of the most daring. Bide your time is a good motto, and I recommend it to you. You must feel that, however we may be at variance in our opinions, Edward Armitage, my hand and my authority never can be used against one to whom I am so indebted, and feeling this, you compel me in the presence of others to use a harshness and coldness towards you, contrary, wholly contrary, to what, you may believe me when I say it, I really feel for one who so nobly rescued my only child. I thank you, sir, for your advice, which I feel to be good, and for your good opinion, which I value, and which I feel that you deserve, and you shall have, young as you are, my confidence, which I know you will not abuse. I did know this man who now lies dead before us, and I did also know that he was concealed in this cottage. Major Ratcliffe was one of my earliest and dearest friends, and until this unhappy civil war, there never was any difference between us, and even afterwards only in politics, and the cause we each espoused. I knew, before I came down here as intendant, where his place of concealment was, and have been most anxious for his safety. Excuse me, Mr. Heatherstone, but each day I find more to make me like you than I did the day before. At first I felt most inimical. Now I only wonder how you can be leagued with the party you now are. Edward Armitage, I will now answer for myself and thousands more. You are too young a man to have known the cause of the insurrection, or rather opposition to the unfortunate King Charles. He attempted to make himself absolute, and to wrest the liberties from the people of England, that his warmest adherents will admit. When I joined the party which opposed him, I little thought that matters would have been carried so far as they have been. I always considered it lawful to take up arms in defense of our liberties, but at the same time I equally felt that the person of the king was sacred. I have heard so, sir. Yes, and in truth, for never did any people strive more zealously to prevent the murder of the king, for murder it was, than my relative Ashley Cooper and myself. So much so, indeed, as to have incurred not only the suspicion but the ill will of Cromwell, who, I fear, is now making rapid advances towards that absolute authority for which the king has suffered, and which he would now vest in his own person. I considered that our cause was just, and, had the power been left in the hands of those who would have exercised it with discretion and moderation, the king would even now have been on the throne, and the liberties of his subjects sacred. But it is easier to put a vast and powerful engine into motion than to stop it, and such has been the case in this unfortunate civil war. Thousands who took an active part against the king will, when the opportunity is ripe, retrace their steps, but I expect that we have much to suffer before that time will come. And now, Edward Armitage, I have said more to you than I have to any person breathing, except my own kinsman. I thank you for your confidence, sir, which not only will not be betrayed, but will act as a warning to guide my future conduct. I meant it should. Be no longer rash and careless in avowing your opinions. You can do no good to the cause, and may do yourself much harm. And now I must ask you another question, which I could not before the other people. You have surprised me by stating that Major Ratcliffe had a son here. There must be some mistake, or the boy must be an impostor. He had a daughter, an only daughter, as I have, but he never had a son. It is a mistake that I fell into, sir, by finding a boy here, as I stated to you at the inquest, and I considered it to be a boy until I brought her home, and she then discovered to my sisters that she was a girl dressed in boy's clothes. I did not give that as explanation at the inquest, as it was not necessary. I am right, then. I must relieve you of that charge, Edward Armitage. She shall be to me as a daughter, and I trust that you will agree with me, without any disparagement to your feelings, that my house will be a more fit residence for her than your cottage. I will not prevent her going, if she wishes it, after your explanation and confidence, Mr. Heatherstone. One thing more. As I said to you before, Edward Armitage, I believe many of these Verdairers, all of whom have been selected from the army, are spies upon me. I must therefore be careful. You said that you were not aware that there were any papers? I saw none, sir, but I suspect, from the many locked-up trunks and small boxes, that there may be. But when I went out with the others from the inquest, I dispatched my brother Humphrey to the cottage, advising him to open all the locks and to remove any papers which he might find. The intendant smiled. Well, if such is the case, we have only to go to your cottage and make an examination. We shall find nothing, and I shall have performed my duty. I was not aware that your brother was here. I presume it was the young man who walked with Oswald Partridge. It was, sir. By his appearance, I presume that he also was brought up at Arnwood? He was, sir, as well as I, replied Edward. Well, then, I have but one word more to say. Recollect, if I appear harsh and severe in the presence of others, it is only assumed towards you, and not real. You understand that? I do, sir, and beg you will exercise your discretion. The intendant then went out and said to the party, It appears from what I can extract from this lad Armitage, that there are boxes which he removed to his cottage. We will go there to see what they may contain. It is now noon. Have you any refreshment to offer us in your cottage, young man, when we arrive? I keep no hostelry, sir, replied Edward, somewhat gloomily. My own labor, and my brother's, is sufficient for the support of my own family, but no more. Let us move on. and two of you keep your eye upon that young man," said the intendant aside. They then proceeded through the wood. The intendant mounted his horse, and they set off for the cottage, where they arrived at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Chapter 17. Humphrey came out as soon as he perceived the intendant and his party approaching, and whispered to Edward that all was safe. The intendant dismounted, and ordering everybody but his clerk to wait outside, was ushered into the cottage by Edward. Alice, Edith, and Pablo were in the room. The two girls were not a little flushed and frightened by the unusual appearance of so large a body of strangers. "These are my sisters, sir," said Edward. "Where is Clara, Alice?" "She is alarmed, and has gone into our bedroom." "I hope you are not alarmed at my presence," said the intendant, looking earnestly at the two girls. "It is my duty which obliges me to pay this visit, but you have nothing to fear. Now, Edward Armitage, you must produce all the boxes and packages which you took from the cottage." "I will, sir," replied Edward, "and here are the keys." "Humphrey, do you and Pablo bring them out?" The boxes were brought out, opened, and examined by the intendant and his clerk, but of course no papers were found in them. "I must now send in two of my people to search the house," said the intendant. "Had you not better go to the little girl, that she may not be frightened?" "I will go to her," said Alice. Two of the people, assisted by the clerk, then searched the house. They found nothing worthy of notice, except the weapons and armor which Edward had removed, and which he stated to the intendant that he took away as valuable property belonging to the little girl. "It is sufficient," said the intendant to his clerk. "Undoubtedly there are no papers, but I must, before I go, interrogate this child, who has been removed thus. But she will be frightened, and I shall obtain no answer from her if we are so many. So let everybody leave the cottage while I speak to her." The clerk and the others left the cottage, and the intendant desired Edward to bring Clara from the bedroom. She came out, accompanied by and indeed clinging to Alice, for she was much alarmed. "Come here, Clara," said the intendant gently. "You do not know perhaps that I am your sincere friend, and now that your father is dead, I want you to come and live with my daughter, who will be delighted to have you as a companion. Will you go with me? And I will take care of you and be a father to you." "I do not like to leave Alice and Edith, they treat me so kindly, and call me sister," replied Clara, sobbing. "I am sure they do, and you must be fond of them already, but still it is your duty to come with me, and if your father could speak to you now he would tell you so. I will not force you away, but remember, you are born a lady, and must be brought up and educated as a lady, which cannot be the case in this cottage, although they are very kind to you, and very nice young people. You do not recollect me, Clara, but you have often sat on my knee when you were a little girl, and when your father lived in Dorsetshire. You recollect the great walnut tree by the sitting-room window, which looked out in the garden, don't you?" "Yes," replied Clara, with surprise. "Yes, so do I too, and how you used to sit on my knee. And do you remember Jason, the big mastiff, and how you used to ride upon his back?" "Yes," replied Clara, "I do, but he died a long while ago." "He did, when you were not more than 6 years old. And now tell me, where did the old gardener bury him?" "Under the mulberry tree," replied Clara. "Yes, so he did, and I was there when poor Jason was buried." "You don't recollect me. But I will take off my hat, for I did not wear the same dress that I do now. Now look, Clara, and see if you remember me." Clara, who was no longer alarmed, looked on the intendant's face, and then said, "You called my father Philip, and he used to call you Charles." "You are right, my sweet one," replied the intendant, pressing Clara to his bosom. "I did so, and we were great friends. Now, will you come with me? And I have a little girl, older than you by 3 or 4 years, who will be your companion and love you dearly. May I come and see Alice and Edith sometimes?" "Yes, you shall, and she will come with you and make their acquaintance, if their brother will permit it. I will not take you away now, dearest. You shall remain here for a few days, and then we will come over and fetch you. I will send Oswald Partridge over to let you know the day, Edward Armitage, when we will come for her. Goodbye, dear Clara, and goodbye, my little girls. Humphrey Armitage, goodbye. Who is this lad you have there?" "He is a gypsy whom Humphrey trapped in his pitfall, sir, and we have soon tamed him," replied Edward. "Well, then, Edward Armitage, goodbye," said the intendant, extending his hand to him. "We must meet soon again." The intendant then went out of the cottage, and joined his people outside. Edward went out after him, and as the intendant mounted his horse, he said very coldly to Edward, "I shall keep a sharp lookout on your proceedings, sir. Depend upon it, I tell you so decidedly, so fare you well." With these words the intendant put the spurs to his horse, and rode away. "What made him speak so sharply to you, Edward?" said Humphrey. "Because he means kindly, but does not want other people to know it," replied Edward. "Come in, Humphrey, I have much to tell you and much to surprise you with." "I have been surprised already," replied Humphrey. "How did this Roundhead know Clara's father so well?" "I will explain all before we go to bed," replied Edward. "Let us go in now." The two brothers had a long conversation that evening, in which Edward made Humphrey acquainted with all that had passed between him and the intendant. "It's my opinion, Edward," said Humphrey, "that he thinks matters have been carried too far, and that he is sorry that he belongs to the parliamentary party. He finds out, now that it is too late, that he has allied himself with those who have very different feelings and motives than his own, and has assisted to put power into the hands of those who have not the scruples which he has. Yes, and in ridding themselves of one tyranny, as they considered it, they have every prospect of falling into the hands of a greater tyrant than before, for, depend upon it, Cromwell will assume the sovereign power, and rule this kingdom with a rod of iron. Well, many more are, I have no doubt, or soon will be, of his opinion, and the time will come, be it sooner or later, when the king will have his own again. They have proclaimed him in Scotland already. Why does he not come over and show himself? His presence would, I think, induce thousands to flock to him. I'm sure that it would me. I am very glad of this good intelligence with the intendant, Edward, as it will not now be necessary for us to be so careful. We may go and come when we please. I almost wish you could be persuaded to accept any eligible offer he may make you. Many no doubt are in office, and serving the present government, who have the same feelings as the intendant, or even feelings as strong as your own. I cannot bear the idea of accepting anything from them or their instruments, Humphrey, nor, indeed, could I leave my sisters. On that score you may make your mind easy. Pablo and I are quite sufficient for the farm, or anything else we may want to do. If you can be more useful elsewhere, have no scruple in leaving us. If the king was to come over and raise an army, you would leave us, of course, and I see no reason why, if an eligible offer is made you, you should not do it now. You and your talents are thrown away in this forest, and you might serve the king and the king's cause better by going into the world and watching the times than you ever can by killing his venison." "Certainly," replied Edward, laughing, "I do not much help his cause by killing his deer, that must be admitted. All I shall say is this: if anything is offered to me which I can accept without injury to my feelings and my honor, I shall not decline it, provided that I may, by accepting it, prove of service to the king's cause. That is all I wish, Edward. And now I think we had better go to bed." The next day they dug up the iron chest and the box into which Humphrey had put all the papers he had collected together. Edward opened the iron chest, and found in it a considerable quantity of golden bags, and many trinkets and jewels which he did not know the value of. The papers he did not open, but resolved that they should be given to the intendant, for Edward felt that he could trust in him. The other boxes and trunks were also opened and examined, and many other articles of apparent value discovered. "I should think all these jewels worth a great deal of money, Humphrey," said Edward. "If so, all the better for poor little Clara. I am sorry to part with her, although we have known her so short a time. She appears to be such an amiable and affectionate child." "That she is, and certainly the handsomest little girl I ever saw. What beautiful eyes! Do you know that on one of her journeys to Lymington she was very nearly taken by a party of gypsies? And by what Pablo can make out, it would appear that it was by the party which he belonged to. I wonder at her father's permitting her to go alone such a distance. Her father could not do otherwise. Necessity has no law. He could trust no other person, so he put her in boy's clothes that there might be less risk. Still, she must have been very intelligent to have done the office." "She is 13 years old, although she is small," replied Edward. "And intelligent she certainly is, as you may see by her countenance. Who would ever have imagined that our sisters would have been able to do what they are doing now? It's an old saying, we never know what we can do till we try. By the by, Humphrey, I met a famous herd of forest ponies the other day, and I said to myself, I wonder whether Humphrey will be clever enough to take one of them, as he has the wild cattle? For Billy is getting old, and we want a successor." "We want more than a successor to Billy, Edward. We want 2 more to help him, and I have the means of maintaining 2 more ponies if I could catch them." "I fear that you will never manage that, Humphrey," said Edward, laughing. "I know well what you mean," replied Humphrey. "You wish to dare me to it. Well, I won't be dared to anything, and I most certainly will try to catch a pony or 2, but I must think about it first, and when I have arranged my plan in my mind I will then make the attempt. When I see the ponies in the yard I will believe it, Humphrey. They are as wild as deer and as fleet as the wind, and you cannot catch them in a pitfall." "I know that, good brother, but all I can say is, that I will try what I can do, and I can do no more, but not at present, for I am too busy." 3 days after this conversation Oswald Partridge made his appearance, having been sent by the intendant to tell Edward that he should come over on the following day to take away little Clara. "And how is she to go?" said Edward. "He will bring a little nag for her, if she can ride. If she cannot, she must ride in the cart which will come for the baggage." "Clara, can you ride a horse?" "Yes," replied Clara, "if it does not jump about too much. I always rode one when I lived in Dorsetshire." "This won't jump about, "My little lady," said Oswald, for he is 30 years old, I believe, and as steady as an old gentleman ought to be. "I have had some conversation with Master Heatherstone," continued Oswald to Edward. "He is much pleased with you, I can tell you. He said that in times like these he required young men like you about him, and that as you would not take the berth of Verderer, he must find one better suited for you, for he said you were too good for such an office." "Many thanks to him for his good opinion," replied Edward, "but I do not think that he has any office in his gift which I can accept." "So I thought, but I said nothing." He again asked many questions relative to old Jacob Armitage, and he pressed me very hard. He said that Humphrey was as much above his position in appearance as you were, but as he was brought up at Arnwood he presumed that he had had the same advantages. And then he said, "But were his 2 sisters brought up at Arnwood also?" I replied that I believed not, although they were often there, and were allowed to play with the children of the house. He looked at me steadfastly, as if he would read my thoughts, and then went on writing. "I cannot help thinking that he has a suspicion that you are not the grandchildren of old Jacob, but at the same time I do not think that he has an idea who you really are." "You must keep our secret, Oswald," replied Edward. "I have a very good opinion of the intendant, I acknowledge, but I will trust nobody." "As I hope for future mercy, sir, I never will divulge it until you bid me," replied Oswald. "I trust to you, Oswald, and so there's an end of the matter. But, tell me, Oswald, what do they say about his taking charge of this little girl?" "Why, they did begin to talk about it, but when he gave out that it was the order of Parliament that the child should remain with him until further directions, of course they said nothing, for they dared not. It seems that the Ratcliffe property is sequestrated, but not yet granted to anyone, and the Parliament will most likely, as soon as she is old enough, give her as a wife, with the property, to one of their party. They have done it before now, as it secures the property under all changes." "I perceive," replied Edward. "When did you hear that the little girl was to live with him?" "Not till yesterday morning, and it was not till the evening that we knew it was the order of Parliament." Edward did not think it right to tell Oswald what he knew, as it was a secret confided to him by the intendant, and therefore merely observed, "I presumed that the child would not be left on our hands," and then the conversation dropped. As Oswald had informed them, the intendant made his appearance in the forenoon of the following day, and was accompanied by his daughter, who rode by his side. A groom, on another horse, led a pony for Clara to ride, and a cart for the luggage followed at some distance. Edward went out to assist Miss Heatherstone to dismount, and she frankly extended her hand to him as she reached the ground. Edward was a little surprised as well as pleased at this condescension on her part towards a forester. "You do me much honor, Mistress Patience," said he, bowing. "I cannot forget that I owe my life to you, Master Armitage," replied Patience, "and I cannot be too grateful. May I request another favor of you?" "Certainly, if it is in my power to do as you wish." "It is this," said she, in a low voice, "that you will not hastily reject any overtures which may be made to you by my father, that is all. And now let me go in and see your sisters, for my father has praised them very much, and I wish to know them." Edward led the way into the cottage, and Patience followed him, while the intendant was in conversation with Humphrey. Edward, having introduced his sisters and Clara, then went out to pay his respects to the intendant, who, now they were alone, was very candid towards both him and Humphrey. Edward then told the intendant that there was an iron chest with a good deal of money in it, and jewels also, and many other articles of value in the other boxes. "I fear, sir, that the cart will hardly hold all the goods. I do not intend to take away the heavy or more bulky articles, such as the bedding, armor, etc. I will only take Clara's own packages, and the valuables and papers. The remainder may stay here, as they can be of no use, till they are demanded from you." "Where is Oswald Partridge?" "In the stable with the horses, sir," replied Humphrey. "Then, when the cart is loaded, and it had better be done by you while the men are in the stable, Oswald shall take charge of it, and take the things to my house." "Here are the keys, sir," said Edward, presenting them. "Good. And now, Edward Armitage, that we are alone, I want to have a little conversation with you. You are aware how much I feel indebted to you for the service you have rendered me, and how anxious I am to show my gratitude. You are born for better things than to remain an obscure forester, and perhaps a deer stalker. I have now an offer to make to you, which I trust, upon reflection, you will not refuse, and I say reflection, because I do not wish you to give an answer till you have well reflected. I know that you will not accept anything under the present government, but a private situation you can raise no objection to, the more so as, so far from leaving your family, you will be more in a position to protect them. I am in want of a secretary, and I wish you to accept that office, to live entirely in my house, and to receive a handsome salary for your services, which will not, I trust, be too heavy. You will be near to your family here in the cottage, and be able to protect them and assist them, and what is more, you will mix with the world and know what is going on, as I am in the confidence of the government. Of course I put implicit confidence in you, or I would not offer the situation. But you will not be always down here. I have my correspondents and friends, to whom I shall have to send you occasionally on most trusty commissions. You, I am sure, will suit me in every respect, and I hope you will undertake the post which I now offer you. Give me no answer just now. Consult with your brother, and give the offer due consideration, and when you have made up your mind you can let me know." Edward bowed, and the intendant went into the cottage. Edward then assisted Humphrey and Pablo to get the iron chest on the cart, and covered it with the other packages and boxes, till the cart was well loaded. Leaving Pablo in charge till Oswald came from the stables, Edward and Humphrey then went into the cottage, where they found a very social party, Patience Heatherstone having succeeded in making great friends with the other 3 girls, and the intendant, to Edward's surprise, laughing and joking with them. Alice and Edith had brought out some milk, biscuits, and all the fruit that was ripe, with some bread, a piece of cold salt beef, and a ham, and they were eating as well as talking. "I have been praising your sister's housekeeping, Armitage," said the intendant. "Your farm appears to be very productive." "Alice expected Miss Heatherstone, sir," replied Edward, and made an unusual provision. "You must not think that we live on such fare every day." "No," replied the intendant drily, "on other days I dare say you have other fare. I would almost make a bet that there is a pasty in the cupboard which you dare not show to the intendant of the New Forest." "You are mistaken, sir, for once," replied Humphrey. "Alice knows well how to make one, but she has not one just now." "Well, I must believe you, Master Humphrey," replied the intendant. "And now, my dear child, we must think of going, for it is a long ride, and the little girl is not used to a horse." Mistress Alice, many thanks for your hospitality, and now, farewell. Edith, goodbye, dear. Now, Clara, are you quite ready? They all went out of the cottage. The intendant put Clara on the pony, after she had kissed Alice and Edith. Edward assisted Patience, and when she was mounted she said, "I hope you will accept my father's offer, you will oblige me so much if you do." "I will give it every consideration it deserves," replied Edward. "Indeed, it will depend more upon my brother than myself whether I accept it or not." "Your brother is a very sensible young man, sir, therefore I have hopes," replied Patience. "A quality which it appears you do not give me credit for, Miss Heatherstone." "Not when pride or vindictive feelings obtain the mastery," replied she. "Perhaps you will find that I am not quite so proud, or bear such ill will, as I did when I first saw your father, Miss Heatherstone, and some allowance should be made, even if I did show such feelings, when you consider that I was brought up at Arnwood." "True, most true, Master Armitage. I had no right to speak so boldly, especially to you, who risked your own life to save the daughter of one of those Roundheads who treated the family of your protector so cruelly. You must forgive me, and now, farewell." Edward bowed, and then turned to the intendant, who had apparently been waiting while the conversation was going on. The intendant bade him a cordial farewell. Edward shook Clara by the hand, and the cavalcade set off. They all remained outside of the cottage till the party were at some distance, and then Edward walked apart with Humphrey, to communicate to him the offer made by the intendant, and ask his opinion. "My opinion is made up, Edward, which is, that you should accept it immediately. You are under no obligation to the government, and you have already conferred such an obligation upon the intendant that you have a right to expect a return. Why stay here, when you can safely mix with the world and know how things are going on? I do not require your assistance, now that I have Pablo, who is more useful every day. Do not lose such an opportunity of making a friend for yourself and all of us, a protector, I may say, and who is, by what he has confided to you, anything but approving of the conduct of the present government. He has paid you a deserved compliment by saying that he can and will trust you. You must not refuse the offer, Edward, it would really be folly if you did. I believe you are right, Humphrey, but I have been so accustomed to range the forest, I am so fond of the chase, I am so impatient of control or confinement, that I hardly know how to decide. A secretary's life is anything but pleasing to me, sitting at a table writing and reading all day long. The pen is but a poor exchange for the long-barreled gun. It does more execution, nevertheless, replied Humphrey, if what I have read is true. But you are not to suppose that your life will be such a sedentary one. Did he not say that he would have to trust you with missions of importance? Will you not, by going to London and other places, and mixing with people of importance, be preparing yourself for your proper station in life, which I trust that one day you will resume? And does it follow that because you are appointed a secretary you are not to go out in the forest and shoot a deer with Oswald, if you feel inclined, with this difference, that you may do it then without fear of being insulted or persecuted by such a wretch as that Corbould? Do not hesitate any longer, my dear brother. Recollect that our sisters ought not to live this forest life as they advance in years. They were not born for it, although they have so well conformed to it. It depends upon you to release them eventually from their false position, and you can never have such an opening as is now offered you, by one whose gratitude alone will make him anxious to serve you. You are right, Humphrey, and I will accept the offer. I can but return to you if things do not go on well." "I thank you sincerely for your decision, Edward," replied Humphrey. "What a sweet girl that Patience Heatherstone is. I think I never saw such an enchanting smile." Edward thought of the smile she gave him when they parted but an hour ago, and agreed with Humphrey, but he replied, "Why, brother, you are really in love with the intendant's daughter." "Not so, my dear fellow, but I am in love with her goodness and sweetness of disposition, and so are Alice and Edith, I can tell you. She has promised to come over and see them, and bring them flowers for their garden, and I hardly know what, and I am very glad of it, as my sisters have been buried here so long that they cannot but gain by her company now and then. No, I will leave Mistress Heatherstone for you. I am in love with little Clara." "Not a bad choice, Humphrey. We both aspire high, for two young foresters, do we not? However, they say every dog has his day, and Cromwell and his Parliament may have theirs. King Charles may be on his throne again now, long before you catch a forest pony, Humphrey." "I hope he will, Edward, but recollect how you laughed at the idea of my catching a cow. You may be surprised a second time. Where there is a will there is a way, the saying is. But I must go and help Alice with the heifer. She is not very quiet yet, and I see her going out with her pail." The brothers then parted, and Edward walked about, turning over in his mind the events of the day, and very often finding his thoughts broken in upon by sudden visions of Patience Heatherstone, and certainly the remembrance of her was to him the most satisfactory and pleasing portion of the prospect in his offered situation. "I shall live with her, and be continually in her company," thought he. "Well, I would take a less pleasing office if only for that. She requested me to accept it to oblige her, and I will do so. How hasty we are in our conclusions! When I first saw her father, what an aversion I felt for him. Now, the more I know him, the more I like him, nay, more, respect him. He said that the king wished to be absolute, and wrest the liberties from his subjects, and that they were justified in opposing him. I never heard that when at Arnwood. If so, was it lawful so to do? I think it was, but not to murder him, that I can never admit, nor does the intendant. On the contrary, he holds his murderers in as great detestation as I do. Why, then, we do not think far apart from one another." At the commencement, the two parties were those who supported him, not admitting that he was right, but too loyal to refuse to fight for their king, and those who opposed, hoping to force him to do right, the king for his supposed prerogatives, the people for their liberties. The king was obstinate, the people resolute, until virulent warfare inflamed both parties, and neither would listen to reason, and the people gained the upper hand. They wreaked their vengeance, instead of looking to the dictates of humanity and justice. How easy it had been to have deposed him, and have sent him beyond the seas. Instead of which they detained him a prisoner and then murdered him. The punishment was greater than the offense, and dictated by malice and revenge. It was a diabolical act, and will soil the page of our nation's history. So thought Edward, as he paced before the cottage, until he was summoned in by Pablo to their evening meal. Chapter 18. "Edward," said Edith, "scold Pablo. He has been ill-treating my poor cat. He is a cruel boy." Pablo laughed. "See, Edward, he's laughing. Put him in the pitfall again, and let him stay there till he says he is sorry." "I very sorry now, Missy Edith, but cat bite me," said Pablo. "Well, if pussy did, it didn't hurt you much, and what did I tell you this morning out of the Bible? That you must forgive them who behave ill to you." "Yes, Missy Edith, you tell me all that, and so I do. I forgive pussy 'cause she bite me, but I kick her for it." "That's not forgiveness, is it, Edward? You should have forgiven it at once, and not kicked it at all." "Miss Edith, when pussy bite me, pussy hurt me, make me angry, and I give her a kick, then I think what you tell me, and I do as you tell me. I forgive pussy with all my heart." "I think you must forgive Pablo, Edith," said Edward, "if it is only to set him a good example." "Well, I will this time, but if he kicks pussy again, he must be put in the pitfall, mind that, Pablo." "Yes, Missy Edith, I go into pitfall, and then you cry, and ask Master Edward to take me out. When you have me put in pitfall, then you not good Christian, 'cause you not forgive. When you cry and take me out, then you good Christian once more." By this conversation it will appear to the reader that they had been trying to impress Pablo with the principles of the Christian religion, and such was the case, Edith having been one of the most active in the endeavor, although very young for a missionary. However, Alice and Humphrey had been more successful, and Pablo was now beginning to comprehend what they had attempted to instill, and was really progressing every day. Edward remained at the cottage, expecting to hear some message from the intendant. He was right in his conjecture, for, on the third day, Oswald Partridge came ever to say that the intendant would be happy to see him, if he could make it convenient to go over, which Edward assented to do on the following day. Oswald had ridden over on a pony. Edward arranged to take Billy and return with him. They started early the next morning, and Edward asked Oswald if he knew why the intendant had sent for him. "Not exactly," replied Oswald, "but I think, from what I heard Miss Patience say, it is to offer you some situation, if you could be prevailed upon to accept it." "Very true," replied Edward. "He offers me the post of secretary." "What do you think?" "Why, sir, I think I would accept it. At all events, I would take it on trial. There can be no harm done. If you do not like it, you can only go back to the cottage again. One thing I am sure of, which is, that Master Heatherstone will make it as pleasant to you as he can, for he is most anxious to serve you." "That I really believe," replied Edward, "and I have, pretty well, made up my mind to accept the office. It is a post of confidence, and I shall know all that is going on, which I cannot do while I am secluded in the forest, and depend upon it, we shall have stirring news." "I suppose you think that the king will come over," replied Oswald. "I feel certain of it, Oswald, and that is the reason why I want to be where I can know all that is going on." "Well, sir, it is my opinion that the king will come over, as well as yours, yet I think at present he stands but a poor chance. Master Heatherstone knows more on that score than anyone, I should think, but he is very close." The conversation then changed, and after a ride of 8 hours they arrived at the intendant's house. Edward gave Billy into Oswald's charge, and knocked at the door. Phoebe let him in, and asked him into the sitting-room, where he found the intendant alone. "Edward Armitage, I am glad to see you, and shall be still more so if I find that you have made up your mind to accept my proposition. What is your reply?" "I am very thankful to you for the offer, sir," replied Edward, "and will accept it if you think that I am fitted for it, and if I find that I am equal to it, I can but give it a trial, and leave if I find it too arduous or too irksome. Too arduous it shall not be, that shall be my concern, and too irksome I hope you will not find it. My letters are not so many but that I could answer them myself, were it not that my eyes are getting weak, and I wish to save them as much as possible. You will therefore have to write chiefly what I shall dictate, but it is not only for that I require a person that I can confide in. I very often shall send you to London instead of going myself, and to that I presume you will have no objection? Certainly none, sir. Well, then, it is no use saying any more just now. You will have a chamber in this house, and you will live with me, and at my table altogether. Neither shall I say anything just now about remuneration, as I am convinced that you will be satisfied. All that I require now is to know the day that you will come, that everything may be ready. I suppose, sir, I must change my attire, replied Edward, looking at his forester's dress, that will hardly accord with the office of secretary. I agree with you that it will be better to keep that dress for your forest excursions, as I presume you will not altogether abandon them, replied the intendant. You can provide yourself with a suit at Lymington. I will furnish you the means. I thank you, sir, I have means, much more than sufficient, replied Edward, although not quite so wealthy as little Clara appeared to be. Wealthy, indeed, replied the intendant. I had no idea that poor Ratcliffe possessed so much ready money and jewels. Well, then, this is Wednesday. Can you come over next Monday? Yes, sir, replied Edward. I see no reason to the contrary. Well, then, that is settled, and I suppose you would like to see your accommodation. Patience and Clara are in the next room. You can join them, and you will make my daughter very happy by telling her that you are to become a resident with us. You will of course dine with us today, and sleep here tonight. Mr. Heatherstone then opened the door, and saying to his daughter, Patience, my dear, I leave you to entertain Edward Armitage till dinner time, he ushered Edward in, and closed the door again. Clara ran up to Edward as soon as he went in, and having kissed him, Edward then took Patience's offered hand. Then you have consented, said Patience inquiringly. Yes, I could not refuse such kindness, replied Edward. And when do you come? On Monday night, if I can be ready by that time. Why, what have you to get ready? Said Clara. I must not appear in a forester's dress, my little Clara. I can wear that with a gun in my hand, but not with a pen, so I must go to Lymington and see what a tailor can do for me. You will feel as strange in a secretary's dress as I did in boy's clothes, said Clara. Perhaps I may, said Edward, although he felt that such would not be the case, having been accustomed to much better clothes when at Arnwood than what were usually worn by secretaries, and this remembrance brought back Arnwood in its train, and Edward became silent and pensive. Patience observed it, and after a time said, You will be able to watch over your sisters, Mr. Armitage, as well here, almost, as if you were at the cottage. You do not return till tomorrow? How did you come over? I rode the pony Billy, Mistress Patience. Why do you call her Mistress Patience, Edward? Said Clara. You call me Clara, why not call her Patience? You forget that I am only a forester, Clara, replied Edward, with a grave smile. No, you are a secretary now, replied Clara. Mistress Patience is older than you by several years. I call you Clara, because you are but a little girl, but I must not take that liberty with Mistress Heatherstone." "Do you think so, Patience?" said Clara. "I certainly do not think that it would be a liberty in a person, after being well acquainted with me, to call me Patience," replied she, "especially when that person lives in the house with us, eats and associates with us as one of the family, and is received on an equality. But I dare say, Clara, that Master Armitage will be guided by his own feelings, and act as he considers to be proper." "But you give him leave, and then it is proper," replied Clara. "Yes, if he gave himself leave, Clara," said Patience. "But we will now show him his own room, Clara," continued Patience, wishing to change the subject of conversation. "Will you follow us, sir?" said Patience, with a little mock ceremony. Edward did so without replying, and was ushered into a large airy room, very neatly furnished. "This is your future lodging," said Patience. "I hope you will like it." "Why, he never saw anything like it before," said Clara. "Yes, I have, Clara," replied Edward. "Where did you?" "At Arnwood. The apartments were on a much larger scale." "Arnwood? Oh yes, I have heard my father speak of it," said Clara, with the tears starting in her eyes at his memory. "Yes, it was burnt down, and all the children burnt to death." "So they say, Clara, but I was not there when it was burnt." "Where were you then?" "I was at the cottage where I now live." Edward turned round to Patience, and perceived that her eyes were fixed upon him, as if she would have read his thoughts. Edward smiled, and said, "Do you doubt what I say?" "No, indeed," said she, "I have no doubt that you were at the cottage at the time, but I was thinking that if the apartments at Arnwood were more splendid, those at your cottage are less comfortable. You have been used to better and to worse, and therefore will, I trust, be content with these." "I trust one have shown no signs of discontent." "I should indeed be difficult to please, if an apartment like this did not suit me. Besides, allow me to observe, that although I stated that the apartments at Arnwood were on a grander scale, I never said that I had ever been a possessor of one of them." Patience smiled and made no reply. "Now that you know your way to your apartment, Master Armitage, we will, if you please, go back to the sitting-room," said she. As they were going back into the sitting-room, she said, "When you come over on Monday, you will, I presume, bring your clothes in a cart?" "I ask it, because I promised some flowers and other things to your sisters, which I can send back by the cart." "You are very kind to think of them, Mistress Patience," replied Edward. "They are fond of flowers, and will be much pleased with possessing any." "You sleep here tonight, I think my father said?" inquired Patience. "He did make the proposal, and I shall gladly avail myself of it, as I am not to trust to Phoebe's ideas of comfort this time," said Edward, smiling. "Yes, that was a cross-action of Phoebe's, and I can tell you, Master Armitage, that she is ashamed to look you in the face ever since. But how fortunate for me that she was cross, and turned you out as she did. You must forgive her, as she was the means of your performing a noble action, and I must forgive her, as she was the means of my life being saved." "I have no feeling except kindness towards Phoebe," replied Edward. "Indeed, I ought to feel grateful to her. For if she had not given me so bad a bed that night, I never should have been so comfortably lodged as it is proposed that I shall be now." "I hope you are hungry, Edward," said Clara. "Dinner is almost ready." "I dare say I shall eat more than you do, Clara." "So you ought, a great big man like you." "How old are you, Edward?" said Clara. "I am 13. Patience is past 16. Now how old are you?" "I am not yet 18, Clara, so that I can hardly be called a man." "Why, you are as tall as Mr. Heatherstone." "Yes, I believe I am." "And can't you do everything that a man can do?" "I really don't know, but I certainly shall always try so to do." "Well, then, you must be a man." "Clara, if it pleases you, I will be a man." "Here comes Mr. Heatherstone, so I know dinner is ready, is it not, sir?" "Yes, my child, it is," replied Mr. Heatherstone, kissing Clara, "so let us all go in." Mr. Heatherstone, as was usual at that time with the people to whose party he ostensibly belonged, said a grace before meat, of considerable length, and then they sat down to table. As soon as the repast was over, Mr. Heatherstone returned to his study, and Edward went out to find Oswald Partridge, with whom he remained the larger portion of the afternoon, going to the kennel and examining the dogs, and talking of matters connected with the chase. "I have not 2 men that can stalk a deer," observed Oswald. "The men appointed here as verderers and keepers have not one of them been brought up to the business. Most of them are men who have been in the army, and I believe have been appointed to these situations to get rid of them, because they were troublesome, and they are anything but good characters. The consequence is, that we kill but few deer, for I have so much to attend to here, as none of them know their duties, that I can seldom take my own gun out." I stated so to the intendant, and he said, that if you accepted an offer he had made you, and came over here, we should not want venison, so it is clear that he does not expect you to have your pen always in your hand. "I am glad to hear that," replied Edward. "Depend upon it his own table, at all events, shall be well supplied. Is not that the fellow Corbould, who is leaning against the wall?" "Yes, he is to be discharged, as he cannot walk well, and the surgeon says he will always limp. He owes you a grudge, and I am glad that he is going away, for he is a dangerous man. But the sun is setting, Mr. Edward, and supper will soon be on the table. You had better go back to the house." Edward bade Oswald farewell, and returned to the intendant's, and found that Oswald was correct, as supper was being placed on the table. Soon after supper, Phoebe and the men servants were summoned, and prayers offered up by the intendant, after which Patience and Clara retired. Edward remained in conversation with the intendant for about an hour, and then was conducted by him to his room, which had already been shown to him by Patience. Edward did not sleep much that night. The novelty of his situation, the novelty of his prospects, and his speculations thereon, kept him awake till near morning. He was, however, up in good time, and having assisted at the morning prayers, and afterwards eaten a most substantial breakfast, he took his leave of the intendant and the 2 girls, and set off on his return to the cottage, having renewed his promise of coming on the following Monday to take up his abode with them. Billy was fresh, and cantered gaily along, so that Edward was back early in the afternoon, and once more welcomed by his household. He stated to Humphrey all that had occurred, and Humphrey was much pleased at Edward having accepted the offer of the intendant. Alice and Edith did not quite so much approve of it, and a few tears were shed at the idea of Edward leaving the cottage. The next day, Edward and Humphrey set off for Lymington, with Billy in the cart. "Do you know, Edward," said Humphrey, "what I am going to try and purchase?" "I will tell you, as many kids as I can, or goats and kids, I don't care which." "Why, have you not stock enough, already?" You will this year have 4 cows in milk, and you have 2 cow calves bringing up. That is very true, but I do not intend to have goats for their milk, but simply for eating in lieu of mutton. Sheep I cannot manage, but goats, with a little hay in winter, will do well, and will find themselves in the forest all the year round. I won't kill any of the females for the first year or 2, and after that I expect we shall have a flock sufficient to meet any demand upon it. It is not a bad idea, Humphrey. They will always come home, if you have hay for them during the winter. Yes, and a large shed for them to lie in when the snow is on the ground. Now I recollect, when we used to go to Lymington, I saw a great many goats, and I have no doubt that they are to be purchased. I will soon ascertain that for you, from the landlord of the hostelry, replied Edward. We will drive there first, as I must ask him to recommend me a tailor. On their arrival at Lymington, they went straight to the hostelry, and found the landlord at home. He recommended a tailor to Edward, who sent for him to the inn, and was measured by him for a plain suit of dark cloth. Edward and Humphrey then went out, as Edward had to procure boots, and many other articles of dress to correspond with the one which he was about to assume. I am most puzzled about a hat, Humphrey, said Edward. I hate those steeple-crowned hats, worn by the Roundheads, yet the hat and feather is not proper for a secretary. I would advise you to submit to wear the steeple-crowned hats, nevertheless, said Humphrey. Your dress, as I consider, is a sort of disgrace to a cavalier born, and the heir of Arnwood. Why not, therefore, take its hat as well? As secretary to the intendant, you should dress like him. If not, you may occasion remarks, especially when you travel on his concerns. You are right, Humphrey. I must not do things by halves, and unless I wear the hat I might be suspected. I doubt if the intendant wears it for any other reason, said Humphrey. At all events, I will not go to the height of the fashion, replied Edward, laughing. Some of the hats are not quite so tall as the others. Here is the shop for the hat and for the sword belt. Edward chose a hat and a plain sword belt, paid for them, and desired the man to carry them to the hostelry. While all these purchases on the part of Edward, and many others by Humphrey, such as nails, saws, tools, and various articles which Alice required for the household, were being gathered together, the landlord had sent out to inquire for the goats, and found out at what price they were to be procured. Humphrey left Edward to put away their goods into the cart, while he went out a second time, to see the goats. With the man who had them for sale he made an agreement for a male and 3 females with 2 kids each at their sides, and 10 more female kids which had just been weaned. The man engaged to drive them from Lymington, as far as the road went into the forest, on the following day, when Humphrey would meet him, pay him his money, and drive them to the cottage, which would only be 3 miles from the place agreed upon. Having settled that satisfactorily, he returned to Edward, who was all ready, and they returned home. We have dipped somewhat into the bag today, Edward, said Humphrey, but the money is well spent. I think so, Humphrey, but I have no doubt that I shall be able to replace the money very soon, as the intendant will pay me for my services. The tailor has promised the clothes on Saturday without fail, so that you or I must go for them. I will go, Edward. My sisters will wish you to stay with them now, as you are so soon to leave them, and I will take Pablo with me, that he may know his way to the town, and I will show him where to buy things, in case he goes there by himself. It appears to me to have been a most fortunate thing your having caught Pablo as you did, Humphrey, for I do not well know how I could have left you if you had not. At all events I can do much better without you than I should have done, replied Humphrey, although I think now that I could get on by myself. But still, Edward, you know we cannot tell what a day may bring forth, and I might fall sick, or something happen which might prevent my attending to anything, and then, without you or Pablo, everything might have gone to rack and ruin. Certainly, when we think how we were left, by the death of old Jacob, to our own resources, we have much to thank God for in having got on so well. I agree with you, and also that it has pleased heaven to grant us all such good health. However, I shall be close at hand if you want me, and Oswald will always call and see how you get on. I hope you will manage that he calls once a week. I will if I can, Humphrey, for I shall be just as anxious as you are to know if all goes on well. Indeed, I shall insist upon coming over to you once a fortnight, and I hardly think the intendant will refuse me. Indeed, I am sure that he will not. So am I, replied Humphrey. I am certain that he wishes us all well, and has, in a measure, taken us under his protection. But, Edward, recollect, I shall never kill any venison after this, and so you may tell the intendant. I will, and that will be an excuse for him to send some over, if he pleases. Indeed, as I know I shall be permitted to go out with Oswald, it will be hard if a stray buck does not find its way to the cottage. Thus did they continue talking over matters till they arrived at the cottage. Alice came out to them, saying to Humphrey, "Well, Humphrey, have you brought my geese and ducks?" Humphrey had forgotten them, but he replied, "You must wait till I go to Lymington again on Saturday, Alice, and then I hope to bring them with me. As it is, look how poor Billy is loaded." "Where's Pablo?" "In the garden. He has been working there all day, and Edith is with him." "Well, then we will unload the cart, while you get us something to eat, Alice, for we are not a little hungry, I can tell you." "I have some rabbit stew on the fire, Humphrey, all ready for you, and you will find it very good." "Nothing I like better, my dear girl." "Pablo won't thank me for bringing this home," continued Humphrey, taking the long saw out of the cart. "He will have to go to the bottom of the pit again, as soon as the pit is made." The cart was soon unloaded, Billy taken out and turned out to feed, and then they went in to supper. Humphrey was off the next morning, with Pablo, at an early hour, to meet the farmer of whom he had purchased the goats and kids. He found them punctual to the time, at the place agreed upon, and being satisfied with the lot, paid the farmer his money and drove them home through the forest. "Goat very good, kid better, always eat kid in Spain," said Pablo. "Were you born in Spain, Pablo?" "Not sure, but I think so. First recollect myself in that country." "Do you recollect your father?" "No, never see him." "Did your mother never talk about him?" "Call her mother, but think no mother at all." "Custom with Gitanas." "Why did you call her mother?" "'Cause she feed me when little, beat me when I get big." "All mothers do that." "What made you come to England?" "I don't know, but I hear people say, plenty of money in England, plenty to eat, plenty to drink, bring plenty money back to Spain." "How long have you been in England?" 1, 2, 3 year, yes, 3 year and a bit." "Which did you like best, England or Spain?" "When with my people, like Spain best, warm sun, warm night." "England, little sun, cold night, much rain, snow, and air always cold, but now I live with you, have warm bed, plenty victuals, like England best. But when you were with the gypsies, they stole everything, did they not? Not steal everything, replied Pablo, laughing. Sometimes take in no pay when nobody there. Farmer look very sharp, have big dog. Did you ever go out to steal? Make me go out. Not bring back something, beat me very hard. Suppose farmer catch me, beat hard too, nothing but beat, beat, beat. Then they obliged you to steal? Suppose bring nothing home, first beat, and then not have to eat for 1, 2, 3 days. How you like that, Master Humphrey? I think you steal after no victuals for 3 days? I should hope not, replied Humphrey, although I have never been so severely punished, and I hope, Pablo, you will never steal any more. Why steal any more? Replied Pablo. I not like to steal, but because hungry I steal. Now I never hungry, always have plenty to eat, no one beat me now, sleep warm all night. Why I steal, then? No, Master Humphrey, I never steal more, 'cause I have no reason why, and 'cause Missy Alice and Missy Edith tell me how the good God up there say must not steal. I am glad to hear you give that as a reason, Pablo, replied Humphrey, as it proves that my sisters have not been teaching you in vain. Like to hear Missy Alice talk, she talk grave. Missy Edith talk too, but she laugh very much, very fond Missy Edith, very happy little girl, jump about just like one of these kids we drive home, always merry. Ha! See cottage now, soon get home, Massa Humphrey. Missy Edith like see kids very much. Where we put them? Chapter 19. We will put them into the yard for the present. I mean that Holdfast shall take charge of them by and by. I will soon teach him. Yes, he take charge of coat, or anything I tell him. Why not take charge of goats? Clever dog, Holdfast. Massa Humphrey, you think Massa Edward take away both his dogs, Smoker and Watch? I say better not take Puppy. Take Smoker and leave Puppy. I agree with you, Pablo. We ought to have 2 dogs here. I will speak to my brother. Now run forward and open the gate of the yard, and throw them some hay, Pablo, while I go and call my sisters. The flock of goats was much admired, and the next morning was driven out into the forest to feed, attended by Pablo and Holdfast. When it was dinner time, Pablo drove the flock near to the cottage, telling the dog to mind the goats. The sensible animal remained at once with them until Pablo's return from dinner, and it may be as well to observe here that in a few days the dog took charge of them altogether, driving them home to the yard every evening, and as soon as they were put into the yard the dog had his supper, and he took good care, therefore, not to be too late. To return to our narrative. On Saturday Humphrey and Pablo went to Lymington to bring home Edward's clothes, and Humphrey made Pablo acquainted with all that he wanted him to know, in case it might be necessary to send him there alone. Edward remained with his sisters, as he was to leave them on the Monday. Sunday was passed as usual. They read the service at old Armitage's grave, and afterwards they walked in the forest, for Sunday was the only day on which Alice could find time to leave her duties in the cottage. They were not more grave than usual at the idea of Edward's leaving them, but they kept up their spirits, as they were aware that it was for the advantage of all. On Monday morning, Edward, to please his sisters, put on his new clothes, and put his forester's dress in the bundle with his linen. Alice and Edith thought he looked very well in them, and said that it reminded them of the days of Arnwood. The fact was that Edward appeared as he was, a gentleman born, that could not well be concealed under a forester's dress, and in his present attire it was undeniable. After breakfast Billy was harnessed and brought to the cottage door. Edward's linen was put in the cart, and, as he had agreed with Humphrey, he took only Smoker with him, leaving the puppy at the cottage. Pablo went with him to bring back the cart. Edward kissed his sisters, who wept at the idea of his leaving them, and shaking hands with Humphrey set off to cross the forest. Who would ever have believed this, thought Edward, as he drove across the forest, that I should put myself under the roof and under the protection of a Roundhead, one in outward appearance, and in the opinion of the world at least, if he is not so altogether in opinion. There is surely some spell upon me, and I almost feel as if I were a traitor to my principles. Why I know not. I feel a regard for that man, and a confidence in him. And why should I not? He knows my principles, my feelings against his party, and he respects them. Surely he cannot wish to gain me over to his party. That were indeed ridiculous, a young forester, a youth unknown. No, he would gain nothing by that, for I am nobody. It must be from goodwill, and no other feeling. I have obliged him in the service I rendered his daughter, and he is grateful. Perhaps, had Edward put the question to himself, should I have been on such friendly terms with the intendant, should I have accepted his offer, if there had been no Patience Heatherstone? He might then have discovered what was the spell upon him which had rendered him so tractable, but of that he had no idea. He only felt that his situation would be rendered more comfortable by the society of an amiable and handsome girl, and he inquired no further. His reverie was broken by Pablo, who appeared tired of holding his tongue, and said, "Massa Edward, you not like leave home, you think very much. Why you go there?" "I certainly do not like to leave home, Pablo, for I am very fond of my brother and sisters, but we cannot always do as we wish in this world, and it is for their sakes, more than from my own inclinations, that I have done so. Can't see what good you do Missy Alice and Missy Edith 'cause you go away. How it possible do good, and not with them? Suppose bad accident, and you away, how you do good? Suppose bad accident, and you at cottage, then you do good. I think, Massa Edward, you very foolish." Edward laughed at this blunt observation of Pablo's, and replied, "It is very true, Pablo, that I cannot watch over my sisters, and protect them in person when I am away, but there are reasons why I should go, nevertheless, and I may be more useful to them by going than by remaining with them. If I did not think so I would not leave them. They know nobody, and have no friends in the world. Suppose anything was to happen to me. Suppose both Humphrey and I were to die, for you know that we never know how soon that event may take place, who would there be to protect my poor sisters, and what would become of them? Is it not, therefore, wise that I should procure friends for them, in case of accident, who would look after them and protect them? And it is my hope, that by leaving them now, I shall make powerful and kind friends for them. Do you understand me?" "Yes, I see now. You think more than me, Massa Edward." "I say just now, you foolish, I say now, Pablo great fool. Besides, Pablo, recollect that I never would have left them as long as there was only Humphrey and me to look after them, because an accident might have happened to one of us. But when you came to live with us, and I found what a good clever boy you were, and that you were fond of us all, I then said, now I can leave my sisters, for Pablo shall take my place, and assist Humphrey to do what is required, and to take care of them. Am I not right, Pablo?" "Yes, Massa Edward," replied Pablo, taking hold of Edward's wrist, "you quite right. Pablo does love Missy Alice, Missy Edith, Massa Humphrey, and you, Massa Edward. He love you all very much indeed. He love you so much that he die for you. Can do no more. That is what I really thought of you, Pablo, and yet I am glad to hear it from your own mouth. If you had not come to live with us, and had not proved so faithful, I could not have left to benefit my sisters, but you have induced me to leave, and they have to thank you if I am able to be of any service to them." "Well, Massa Edward, you go, never mind us, we make plenty of work, do everything all the same as you." "I think you will, Pablo, and that is the reason why I have agreed to go away. But, Pablo, Billy is growing old, and you will want some more ponies." "Yes, Massa Edward, Massa Humphrey talked to me about ponies last night, and say, plenty in the forest. Ask me if I think us able catch them. I say yes, catch 1, 2, 20, suppose want them." "Ah. How will you do that, Pablo?" "Massa Edward, you tell Massa Humphrey no possible, so I no tell you how," replied Pablo, laughing. "Some day you come see us, see 5 ponies in the stable. Massa Humphrey and I, we talk about, find out how, you see." "Well, then, I shall ask no more questions, Pablo, and when I see the ponies in the stable then I'll believe it, and not before. Suppose you want big horse for ride, catch big horse, Massa Edward, you see. Massa Humphrey very clever, he catch cow." "Catch gypsy," said Edward. "Yes," said Pablo, laughing, "catch cow, catch gypsy, and by catch horse." When Edward arrived at the intendant's house, he was very kindly received by the intendant and the 2 girls. Having deposited his wardrobe in his bedroom, he went out to Oswald and put Smoker in the kennel, and on his return found Pablo sitting on the carpet in the sitting room, talking to Patience and Clara, and they all 3 appeared much amused. When Pablo and Billy had both had something to eat, the cart was filled with pots of flowers, and several other little things as presents from Patience Heatherstone, and Pablo set off on his return. "Edward, you do look like a," said Clara, stopping. "Like a secretary, I hope," added Edward. "Well, you don't look like a forester, does he, Patience?" continued Clara. "You must not judge of people by their clothes, Clara." "Nor do I," replied Clara. "Those clothes would not look well upon Oswald, or the other men, for they would not suit them, but they do suit you, don't they, Patience?" Patience Heatherstone, however, did not make any answer to this second appeal made by Clara. "Why don't you answer me, Patience?" said Clara. "My dear Clara, it's not the custom for young maidens to make remarks upon people's attire. Little girls like you may do so." "Why, did you not tell Pablo that he looked well in his new clothes?" "Yes, but Pablo is not Mr. Armitage, Clara." "That is very different." "Well, it may be, but still you might answer a question if put to you, Patience, and I ask again, does not Edward look much better in the dress he has on then and that he generally has worn?" "I think it a becoming dress, Clara, since you will have an answer." "Fine feathers make fine birds, Clara," said Edward, laughing, "and so that is all we can say about it." Edward then changed the conversation. Soon afterwards dinner was announced, and Clara again observed to Edward, "Why do you always call Patience, Mistress Heatherstone?" "Ought he not to call her Patience, sir?" said Clara, appealing to the intendant. "That must depend upon his own feelings, my dear Clara," replied Mr. Heatherstone. "It is my intention to waive ceremony as much as possible. Edward Armitage has come to live with us as one of the family, and he will find himself treated by me as one of us. I shall, therefore, in future address him as Edward, and he has my full permission, and I may say it is my wish that he should be on the same familiar terms with us all. When Edward feels inclined to address my daughter as he does you, by her name of baptism, he will, I dare say, now that he has heard my opinion, do so, and reserve Mistress Heatherstone for the time when they have a quarrel." "Then I hope he will never again address me that way," observed Patience, "for I am under too great obligations to him to bear even the idea of being on bad terms with him." "Do you hear that, Edward?" said Clara. "Yes, I do, Clara, and after such a remark, you may be sure that I shall never address her in that way again." In a few days Edward became quite at home. In the forenoon Mr. Heatherstone dictated 1 or 2 letters to him, which he wrote, and after that his time was at his own disposal, and was chiefly passed in the company of Patience and Clara. With the first he had now become on the most intimate and brotherly footing, and when they addressed each other, Patience and Edward were the only appellations made use of. Once Mr. Heatherstone asked Edward whether he would not like to go out with Oswald to kill a deer, which he did, but the venison was hardly yet in season. There was a fine horse in the stable at Edward's order, and he often rode out with Patience and Clara. Indeed, his time passed so agreeably that he could hardly think it possible that a fortnight had passed away, when he asked permission to go over to the cottage and see his sisters. With the intendant's permission, Patience and Clara accompanied him, and the joy of Alice and Edith was great when they made their appearance. Oswald had, by Edward's request, gone over a day or 2 before, to tell them that they were coming, that they might be prepared, and the consequence was that it was a holiday at the cottage. Alice had cooked her best dinner, and Humphrey and Pablo were at home to receive them. "How pleasant it will be, if we are to see you and Clara whenever we see Edward," said Alice to Patience. "So far from being sorry that Edward is with you, I shall be quite glad of it." "I water the flowers every day," said Edith, "and they make the garden look so gay." "I will bring you plenty more in the autumn, Edith, but this is not the right time for transplanting flowers yet," replied Patience. "And now, Alice, you must take me to see your farm, for when I was here last I had no time. Let us come now, and show me everything." "But my dinner, Patience, I cannot leave it, or it will be spoiled, and that will never do. You must either go with Edith now, or wait till after dinner, when I can get away." "Well, then, we will stay till after dinner, Alice, and we will help you to serve it up." "Thank you. Pablo generally does that, for Edith cannot reach down the things. I don't know where he is." "He went away with Edward and Humphrey, I think," said Edith. "I'll scold him when he comes back for being out of the way." "Never mind, Edith, I can reach the dishes," said Patience, "and you and Clara can then take them, and the platters, and put them on the table for Alice." And Patience did as she proposed, and the dinner was soon afterwards on the table. There was a ham, and 2 boiled fowls, and a piece of salted beef, and some roasted kid, besides potatoes and green peas. And when it is considered that such a dinner was set on the table by such young people, left entirely to their own exertions and industry, it must be admitted that it did them and their farm great credit. In the meantime, Edward and Humphrey, after the first greetings were over, had walked out to converse, while Pablo had taken the horses into the stable. "Well, Humphrey, how do you get on?" "Very well," replied Humphrey. "I have just finished a very tough job. I have dug out the saw pit, and have sawed the slabs for the sides of the pit, and made it quite secure. The large fir tree that was blown down is now at the pit, ready for sawing up into planks, and Pablo and I are to commence tomorrow. At first we made but a bad hand of sawing off the slabs, but before we had cut them all we got on pretty well. Pablo don't much like it, and indeed no more do I much. It is such mechanical work, and so tiring, but he does not complain. I do not intend that he shall saw more than 2 days in a week. That will be sufficient. We shall get on fast enough." "You are right, Humphrey. It is an old saying, that you must not work a willing horse to death. Pablo is very willing, but hard work he is not accustomed to. Well, now you must come and look at my flock of goats, Edward. They are not far off. I have taught Holdfast to take care of them, and he never leaves them now, and brings them home at night. Watch always remains with me, and is an excellent dog, and very intelligent." "You have indeed a fine flock, Humphrey," said Edward. "Yes, and they are improved in appearance already since they have been here. Alice has got her geese and ducks, and I have made a place large enough for them to wash in, until I have time to dig them out a pond. I thought we had gathered more hay than you required, but with this addition, I think you will find none to spare before the spring. So far from it, that I have been mowing down a great deal more, Edward, and it is almost ready to carry away. Poor Billy has had hard work of it, I assure you, since he came back, with one thing and another." "Poor fellow, but it won't last long, Humphrey," said Edward, smiling. "The other horses will soon take his place." "I trust they will," said Humphrey, "at all events by next spring. Before that I do not expect that they will. By the by, Humphrey, you recollect what I said to you that the robber I shot told me, just before he died?" "Yes, I do recollect it now," replied Humphrey, "but I had quite forgot all about it till you mentioned it now, although I wrote it down, that we might not forget it." "Well, I have been thinking all about it, Humphrey. The robber told me that the money was mine, taking me for another person, therefore I do not consider it was given to me, nor do I consider that it was his to give. I hardly know what to do about it, nor to whom the money can be said to belong." "Well, I think I can answer that question. The property of all malefactors belongs to the king, and therefore this money belongs to the king, and we may retain it for the king, or use it for his service. Yes, it would have belonged to the king had the man been condemned, and hung on the gallows as he deserved, but he was not, and therefore I think that it does not belong to the king. Then it belongs to whoever finds it, and who keeps it till it is claimed, which will never be." "I think I must speak to the intendant about it," replied Edward. "I should feel more comfortable." "Then do so," replied Humphrey. "I think you are right to have no concealments from him." "But, Humphrey," replied Edward, laughing, "what silly fellows we are. We do not yet know whether we shall find anything. We must first see if there is anything buried there, and when we have done so, then we will decide how to act. I shall, if it please God, be over again in a fortnight, and in the meantime, do you find out the place, and ascertain if what the fellow said is true." "I will," replied Humphrey. I will go tomorrow, with Billy and the cart, and take a spade and pickaxe with me. It may be a fool's errand, but still they say, and one would credit, for the honor of human nature, that the words of a dying man are those of truth. We had better go back now, for I think dinner must be ready. Now that they had become so intimate with Patience Heatherstone, and I may add, so fond of her, there was no longer any restraint, and they had a very merry dinner party, and after dinner, Patience went out with Alice and Edith, and looked over the garden and farm. She wished very much to ascertain if there was anything that they required, but she could discover but few things, and those only trifles, but she recollected them all, and sent them to the cottage a few days afterwards. But the hour of parting arrived, for it was a long ride back, and they could not stay any longer, if they wished to get home before dark, as Mr. Heatherstone had requested Edward that they should do. So the horses were brought out, and wishing good-bye, they set off again, little Edith crying after them, "Come again soon. Patience must come again soon."
This is the end of part 3. We will meet you at part 4, which is the last part. Stay connected with us to relax your minds and bodies, and don't forget to subscribe and share our channel. See you soon.